council meeting be adopted as circulated. Moved by Ebony, Councillor Logans, and seconded by Councillor Bateman. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to, oh, excuse me.
Yes, we do have a public comment portion on the agenda.
So I'm going to open this up to the public. For anyone wishing to speak, if you could come to the front, state your full name, first and last, the item which you wish to speak to, and if you could also write your name on the paper provided, that would be great. As the only member of the public, would you like to come speak? This is your one opportunity during this meeting to bring up the topic.
Okay, I will speak.
Perfect. So if you could come up to this chair here and turn on the microphone. No rush either.
I assume I just press the green button.
Actually, right at the base of the microphone, there should be a gray button. Perfect. So if you could just give us your first and last name.
Jerry Robbins,
Great.
and I'm here to represent SUIT Transition House Society. We've asked for some money for victim services, and excuse me. Victim Services is contracted by the Ministry of Public Safety. They fund us for $51,072 a year for 22 hours of direct service per week, which works out to 0.6 full-time employee. Funding model and expectations with the municipality is that they will contribute the balance to bring it up to 35 hours a week. That would mean a contribution of $27,926 for the fiscal year. Cost of living increase would be approximately 2% for subsequent years. I know this is a significant contribution for the community, but from January to September 2019, we supported 182 new clients and 1,664 ongoing clients. 162 individuals this time were victims of family violence and about a third of bullying. Many of the clients were supported with court accommodation, which means we take them to court and stay with them and help them afterwards. We do safety planning. We assist crime victims with assistant forms. For a lot of people, they just looking at the forms, if you've been violated and you've been a victim of abuse, you look at the forms and it's like, I can't do this. And what we do is we hope to get them through it all so that they can get the services they needed. And then we forward them to other counseling groups and what have you.
Right.
So, yeah, that's about it in a nutshell.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, I'll just put my name down here.
Perfect. Thank you.
And thank you very much.
Of course.
Want me to turn this off?
Perfect. Great. So I'm going to hand it over to staff. I think the idea is here that we'll let staff go through the entire budget presentation and we can save our questions to the end and any motions just so we can get through everything before with the full picture.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to the speaker, there you will see a slide on victim services about halfway through the presentation today, and our acting director of finance does have some information on that ask. So Rachel will lead you through a PowerPoint presentation. We do encourage you to ask questions through the presentation, but if there are any formal resolutions, we would ask you to jot those down, and we would prefer to deal with all of the resolutions after the presentation, if that is okay with council. And if that's okay, I'm going to hand it over to our acting director of finance.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. So we're here today for the draft budget presentation for the draft 2020 to 2024 5-year financial plan. So the way you've got copies of the PowerPoint in front of you as well. So like if you want to jot down questions or comments on the slides, either ask on the fly or we can just discuss them all at the end as well. Whatever you prefer, we can just make work. And as well, we've got our department heads here behind us. So if there's any specific detailed questions that I can't respond to, they'll be here to provide their input and advice and help answer the questions. So basically, the way the budget presentation is working is it's starting high level, and then I'll kind of drill down into more and more detail as we get to more specific expense and item requests. And so just a quick little summary of the budget process. So we have had, November 4th, we had the service level review meeting. So you'll see in the presentation that there's a slide specifically referencing the resolution that was made at that meeting and just addressing the items that you requested to change from status quo. And as well, we have, it's including requests from external agencies, such as victim services that you'll see later on in the presentation. On top of that, there's department requests, and as well, just a slightly different change to the process this year from prior years was for capital requests. A new form was created for all the departments to complete and fill out, just to kind of provide a bit more information on their specific capital project and kind of talk about the funding and highlights that, you know, is there grants available for this project? So kind of putting it more top of mind of how are we going to fund this project and the timing for it. So that's just kind of a tweak to how it's been done in prior years. So I think that's been really good first start to kind of starting doing some more long-term planning, and it has it all consolidated in one, and everyone's kind of providing the same information. So that was helpful in prioritizing our capital projects for 2020 and onward. As well involved in that, so based on those inputs, I've kind of created a draft and connected in with Norm and the department heads to kind of come up with the version that you see in front of you today. And so now we're at the December 5th meeting where you have the first draft of the 5-year plan in front of you, and fully expect that there'll be some adjustments or potential adjustments to it that can be included in the revised version that will be presented in January, because this will be the last presentation for 2019, and then in January is when kind of the next phase of the budget process will pick up again. So the next step after this would be an open house will occur. I think it's tentatively scheduled for January 22nd, where we did something similar in February, I believe, of this year. And basically, we just had something up in council chambers. We had different booths set up where the public was invited to come and ask any questions about the budget. You know, Parks had some big printouts of slides and things. So it was, you know, as well attended as most things are, but we definitely had, you know, maybe 20 or so people show up and got some pretty good feedback from that. So that was nice. And then after that happens, then any adjustments and considerations from the public will be amended in the financial plan if it's appropriate, and then another revised version will be presented to council to eventually have third reading and then adoption is kind of how the process works. So I'm just going to quickly kind of walk through why are we even doing this. So basically there's multiple legislations that govern local government. There's federal legislation, which is the Constitution Act. Section 125 states that federal government is exempt from paying taxes. There's this Payment in lieu of Taxes Act that says federal government must make payments in lieu of taxes to municipal governments. So we get that for things like the police station and the Whiff and Spit Lighthouse. As well, there's provincial legislation, community charter, which I'm assuming you guys are becoming more and more familiar with. And that's kind of the major bulk of the rules that local governments have to adhere to. There's the Local Government Act that includes tax sale rules, if we have to do a tax sale, and Homeowners Grant Act and BC Assessment Act, Transit Act. There's multiple provincial ones that get affected. Basically, Section 192 of the Charter gives authority for local governments to raise money by means of specific revenue sources such as fees, property taxes, parcel taxes, fines, and penalties. Potentially, Section 199 gives provincial government the authority to make regulations to limit tax increases. And Section 251 of the Charter says owners are responsible to pay for the property taxes, not the current occupier of a house or a residence. And then down to local government, so the things kind of local government are bylaws, which is our legislation. It's a law or rule governing the internal affairs of an organization. So for finance, it's the tax rate bylaw, sewer bylaw, permissive tax exemption bylaws. If you want to change a bylaw, you have to do a bylaw amendment. And of course, as I just mentioned, the two critical finance ones would be the 5-year financial plan bylaw and the property tax rate bylaw. And that one needs to be completed after the adoption of the 5-year financial plan bylaw. And both of them need to be approved by May 15th, which is a legislative requirement. And another factor would be council resolutions. It's an official expression of an opinion or will of council. Resolutions aren't laws. They differ fundamentally in their purpose and are not legislated, but can be changed with a new council resolution. And then the final piece would be council policies. So these express the will of council formally, and policy determines how things will be administered from a council point of view. So, and then this one is just kind of summarizing what I said just previously, that as far as the budget is concerned, annually it must be, council must adopt the 5-year financial plan bylaw before the property tax bylaw and before May 15th. It must include a public consultation portion, which we'll be having in January. The financial plan must not show a deficit. And the property tax bylaw, again, needs to be updated or adopted before May 15th and after the 5-year financial plan bylaw. And once the budget gets adopted, it's considered approved and will form the basis of the annual financial audit. So now getting in some cost drivers that kind of affect how much the revenue and expenses the district has. So population growth, obviously. Population growth puts an increased demand on staff to meet their needs, and infrastructure needs, which combined with historically low taxes, has resulted in the district not keeping pace with demands. So like growth impacts all levels of service. And so as Suka is obviously one of the fastest growing municipalities, it's just will always be a going concern for us to make sure we're managing that correctly. Another concern, as we're all aware, is just historically low taxes. We're trying to right the ship now, so it'll just, it's going to be a long process, and we don't always have to have big, it's just going to be something we just need to manage going forward and be more aware of, and we can't just, steal from Peter to pay Paul constantly, because it's not sustainable in the long term.
Ms. Gray, could you expand on that a little bit more, just for the public? Because when they see tax percentage increases like 7%, 6%, they're, of course, concerned. Can you just go into a little more details why we're having to catch up in essence?
Sure. So before my time here, going back to, it kind of started in 2012. We had a 0% property tax increase. Well, QP agreements alone usually included an annual increase. Every cost we have every year goes up. The costs we have for providing services go up. So it's just been a kind of a culmination of that. 0% in 2012, 2013 was 1.57, 2014 was 0.21, 2015 down to 0, 2016 0.85, and then we slowly kind of have been increasing from there and catching up, but those few years of kind of really low ones has really kind of put us behind the 8 ball, because those were big years for Souk to grow as well as a community, so it kind of has just put us, like I said, behind the 8 ball to try and play catch up here. So it's going to be, a strategy for management and directors going forward to help make sure we're managing that growth properly and properly funding reserves, so we can kind of get ourselves out of this hole and be more proactive in our budget planning going forward and be more sustainable and realistic about what our average, property tax increases going forward are, because year over year, everything will end up costing more, it's just the way the world is going. So it's just a matter of being a bit more proactive in how we're going to manage that. And then the other cost driver, of course, was that, our fees and charges hadn't been increased for many, many years. So in November, you guys got the new bylaw presented to you with proposing some fee increases, so that I think will help us kind of progress and move forward and provide some more funds for that. And of course, call volume, more residents equals more cost for service, which equals more services we need to provide to the community. So I'm just going to kind of quickly touch on the 4 buckets of revenues that the district collects. So we collect property taxes and sewer parcel taxes. Property taxes are estimated to be 9.1 million. Fees and charges, 9.1. Fees and charges are 1.9 million. And this is for service level fees for building permits, DCCs, et cetera. Sewer parcel tax is budgeted to be 2.2 million, and this funds the operations of the sewer, so no sewer expenses are funded through property taxes. They're all managed with the sewer parcel tax. Some other sources of revenue are 6.9 million. This would include the payment in lieu of taxes payments we receive from the federal government or the provincial utility taxes, and grants and any borrowings we have go into that category. And transfers from reserves or grants from other government is budgeted at 3.9 million this year. So this is our reserve funds we have established in the back few pages of our budget 5-year plan. So that equals a total funding source of 24 million. And then we also, on top of that, collect about equivalent of half of the fees for external agencies such as the school districts, BC Transit, the library, CRD, hospital, BC Assessment. There's charges that will show up on people's property taxes notices that we collect on behalf of those organizations, and it's just a net zero to us. It's just what we collect, we remit to the organizations. They send us a statement of what we need to collect from residents, and that gets included on everyone's annual property tax notices. We also collect DCCs for the municipality, as well for CRD water and the school district. Again, the CRD water and school districts we're just a flow through. And the fees and charges that we collect are governed by the fees bylaw that you just saw, the revised version presented to you in November. And those need to be cost recovery. We can't be making money from fees, so they're supposed to just cover the cost of staff time and/or any other factors that would that come into any other expenses that result in providing that service to residents. So then a little bit on the expenses. So the big buckets of expenses are basically department expenses, debt, capital purchases, and transfers to reserves. And so for council, it includes things like wages, community grants, funding line items, community service agreements. CAO's budget includes our legal budget, and long-term planning budget sits there. Office admin and HR includes the building maintenance, is managed through that budget. Legislative services, with the reorg that we're just going under for January 1st, legislative services will now include, the bylaw department is under them. Finance, we'll have finance and IT. The operations department will have GIS, which is our mapping team, and parks and wastewater. Community safety will now just be police and fire, and planning and development and building are now together under the same umbrella. And so just a couple little pie charts to give you something different to look at. So this is just kind of breaking down how much is funded by the property taxes for each department. Of note here is for the 6.4 million in capital, only 116,000 is being paid for with property taxes. The rest is being suggested to be funded through reserves, or recommended to be funded through reserves. And then this is just overall, this is kind of the 4 buckets I was talking about before, how the expenses are being allocated between those 4. So for debt, we're not recommending any changes to debt for 2020, taking on any new debts. Any debts that we knew about in 2020, or last year for 2020, have already been factored into last year's budget, so they're just status quo for this year. There's an increase in capital projects. There's a couple bigger projects I'll get into more detail later that we're introducing for this year, over and above last year's. And then funding sources. So on the flip side, obviously we have to balance the budget. So this is just the pie chart, just kind of visually showing where the revenues are coming from for each department. And yeah, okay. So budget increases maybe wasn't quite the right title, but these are some factors I was just want to get into that kind of have changed the budget. That over from what was originally in the budget. So these are some things we've addressed that will affect and have been included in the budget in front of you today. So staffing, there's 3 new positions being added as part of our reorganization. The staff went through an exercise to prioritize the positions, and 3 positions have been added in the 2020 budget. And as well as what came up at the November 4th special or service level review meeting was the request for potentially more parks workers. So that's been something that's been included in there, and I'll get into more detail on that in the later slides here. The other input would be the service level review. So this is basically the couple of the resolutions that you passed at the November 4th meeting. So those costs are included in here, and there's a slide further on where I'll get into some more detail on those. Outside agency requests, so we've had some requests from School District 62, Victim Services, and Edward Milne School for the theater seats. And on top of that, then there is department request to either achieve what council would like in the service level review resolution, or to achieve the goals in your strategic plan. And then the other piece, it's not necessarily changing the budget, but I just want to kind of highlight, like, we're doing some big major planning here, and the final report should be received or started in 2020, which will affect our prioritization of projects for 2021 and going forward. So we'll be starting work fairly shortly on the official community plan. The strategic plan has already been adopted by council, so there will just be annual work on that will be factoring into every budget year going forward now. And the big reports coming in will be for the transportation and parks and trails master plans, which is carrying over from 2019. So when those final reports get received, then presentations are going to be made to council, and that will kind of help to guide the district going forward on what projects are going to be a priority for us to tackle first. So get the bad stuff out of the way first. Risks to the budget would be staffing, community growth, and years of understaffing have resulted in difficulties for staff to keep pace with residents' needs. We've had difficulty recruiting and increased overtime costs. So there's just a risk, staff getting burned out. Everyone's doing their best here, and there's just more. There's more to do than there is time to do it. So I think it's going to be critical for us to fill some long-standing vacancies in 2020 to help alleviate the pressure on existing staff and let staff be more proactive in our planning. Our building condition assessment. So we're currently undertaking a condition assessment on Municipal Hall. So depending on the results of that will kind of dictate what our priorities might be for any kind of repairs to this building if necessary, because of course as we're growing in staff, we could potentially be running out of space, so we need to kind of consider the condition of this building and what that might mean long-term for the district. The other risk is, of course, reserves. They've been underfunded for years. Some of them are non-existent, and they've been overused to allow for some of the prior year historically low property tax increases. So again, 2020 kind of relies heavily on the reserves to keep the increase as low as possible. But as I've stated before, it's not sustainable in the long term, and steps will just need to be taken in 2020 to better plan for future expenses. And I think getting staffed up will kind of help the district really set some long-term asset management planning, which is critical for us right now. Sewer capacity, as you're aware, our sewer is functioning well right now, but we're definitely, as we're growing, it's a pressing need that we need to consider. And we need to, in 2020, we're going to be looking a lot more seriously and a lot more proactively now at the sewer expansion options, and so expect to hear more from that kind of in 2020 for sure. Aging infrastructure is just, there's a risk of increasing costs for roads maintenance, drainage. Our infrastructure hasn't been well maintained over the years, so there's just that risk of costs and a big pipe bursting or something like that we might not be aware of. So that's just a potential risk. And then the other risk is just rapid growth and development. Just new developments increase pressure on staff, and the facilities. On a more positive side, opportunities. So grants, of course. There's a lot of them out there, but due to the fact that we haven't been able to do much proactive planning, we have either missed the window on applying for grants. Some grants require municipal contributions that weren't planned for. Some grants were completed, could be completed on short notice, which means we could possibly not be submitting our best work. Now knowing the goals of the strategic plan and other plans that are occurring in 2020 will allow us to better prepare and research what grants are available that could help offset some of the municipal costs. And as well, as I mentioned, the new capital sheets kind of include language about applying for grants, so grants is definitely top of mind. And later in the presentation, though, you'll see that there's some budget included to hire a grant writer under contract potentially in 2020 and 2021 until we can determine if that's really a full-time staff position need. So we'll get into that details in the future slides there. Another opportunity to kind of increase our revenues would be through permits and fees. As you were aware, some hadn't increased in years or ever, some didn't exist. So a report to council came forward in November with options and recommendations for potential permits and fee changes, which got first, second, third reading, I believe. So once that is adopted, that will definitely, presumably when that gets adopted, that will help bring in some more permit and fees revenue into the district, which will alleviate the amount required from property taxes. So there is an estimate included in the budget for a potential increase in the fees based on the new fees being proposed. Another thing that isn't in the budget would be cannabis revenue. There's been discussions that municipalities should get a share of the provincial cannabis revenue that's coming from the federal government. So it's not been factored in here because we didn't have any estimates of any kind of money coming in, but that could, once when that gets decided and money can flow through to the district, then we'll definitely would include that in future year budgets. And if a decision was made in 2020, we could come back with a financial plan amendment potentially to include it and come up with some options of what we could use that funding for. But right now it's just an unknown, but it's definitely an opportunity that I think in the near term should hopefully produce some more revenue for the district or provide some more revenue. And of course, another opportunity on the flip side for rapid growth and development is it results in increased permits and fees being received, increase in non-market revenue received, which is basically the revenue we receive from new developments being added to the district year over year.
Through the chair, I'm just curious
Go
about.
ahead, Councillor St. Pierre.
Thank you. I was just curious as to whether or not we had any information on the gas tax and whether or not that was considered at all.
The gas tax, in 2019, there was a, through your worship, in 2019, there was a one-time additional payment of the $560,000, which was included, and as far as I know, it's just it's in the budget to continue on at the regular rate that we were getting of the $560,000 is what's been included in the budget. I didn't have any new information to change that number or anything. So some of the sources of revenue, again, are property taxes. And I caution to put this number out there because, but all things being equal, if nothing changed with BC assessment rates, which we know they're going to change, if this budget was approved as is, I mean, this could result in between like a $90 and $100 increase per year in property taxes to homeowners. But that's a big asterisk beside that because we get BC assessment data, and that's because we're doing this budget a lot earlier than we did last year. Last year I already had that data, so it's a lot easier to prepare some analysis on what the actual impact to taxpayers will be. But that data doesn't come usually, probably sometime next week it comes in. So by January, I mean, I'll have some more current information from BC Assessment that will help. I can provide a lot more details on what potentially this would cost taxpayers, whatever comes as a result of this meeting. Any changes would be factored in. So again, I caution to put that out there because there's many inputs and outputs that will change that number. Once we get the BC Assessment data, that will kind of help determine on average if assessments went up or down, or I'm assuming they've went up, but we don't know for sure yet until we get that data. So once that's available, then I can definitely provide some more detailed analysis on that for the January presentations. Sewer parcel taxes. So there was a bylaw amendment done a couple years ago now that increased sewer parcel taxes from $622 to $653 for 2020. I believe it's from 2020 to 2026. So that has been factored into the budget in front of you. And then the fees and charges. So there's an increase of $124,000 included in the budget to account for the potential new revenue coming in from the fees and charges bylaw amendment that is being hopefully adopted at the next meeting. And then transfers from own funds, it's increased $500,000 from last year. It's still higher than I personally would like, and it's not sustainable in the long term, but we're trying to keep these tax rates as low as possible and have this meeting to kind of help prioritize which projects are going to be important to try and accomplish in 2020. And speaking to the gas tax, so the additional funds we received last year, currently in 2019, have now been used for the 2020 capital projects to kind of fund some more of these projects. So I'll get into more detail about the capital projects in the coming slides. Okay, so expenses, as I mentioned previously, we're not anticipating any new borrowing at this point for 2020. Any borrowing has already been factored into the budget in front of you for current debts we have. Currently, our debts are for a fire ladder truck, and that expires in 2027. The Lot A property purchase, which that debt expires in 2021. Sewer treatment plant, that expires in 2026. Last year, we purchased a water tender truck, and so that's a 5-year equipment loan that should expire sometime in 2024. And then the current loan, the new loan will be for fire truck engine 3, is currently being built, and so that has already been approved by council in 2019's budget. So there'll be some borrowing involved with that, and presumably that should expire in 2025. Capital expenses has increased $1.3 million over last year, and that's a big part of that is the Demamule Creek Bridge Crossing project, which I'll get into in those slides shortly. Again, as in the $6 million of capital projects, we're only suggesting $116,000 or recommending $116,000 be funded from property taxes, and the remainder come from reserves or grants. Transfers to reserves are down. Again, it's just kind of playing the dance of trying to keep property tax rates low, but accomplish as much as we can, and just kind of catch up for some backlog there. And okay, so I'm kind of now going to get into more details of the actual changes to the budget. So for staffing, new positions. So there has 3 positions included in this year's budget that were funded with non-market change revenue. So as I mentioned, that's the revenue that kind of comes from new developments that get added to the district every year. It's allocated separately in the BC assessment data we get, so we can kind of identify that number. So we are adding a senior planner position, which will be obviously in the planning and development department, a communications coordinator, which will report under the CAO's office, and an environmental services technician, which will report under the parks department. So we are currently, those positions have all been prorated in the budget to kind of anticipated start dates. And so we are slightly over the non-market change from the budget currently, but once I receive the new data from BC Assessment, then I'll feel more comfortable potentially bumping up that non-market change number. It's only at $225,000 right now, but I think we could probably, I feel fairly confident that once I get that new data, then we can bump up that number and cover the shortfall there. So those would be the 3 new positions we're recommending being added.
You're good. Go ahead.
Sorry, could you
Yes, go ahead,
reiterate-
Councillor Bateman.
Yes, could you reiterate what you were saying about the 225,000 non-market one more time?
Sure. So in the budget currently, you'll see in the property tax section on the consolidated part, one of the first pages there. There's two kind of buckets. There's municipal general property taxes, which right now is saying 8.9 million, and then there's non-market change of 225,000. So the non-market change is just kind of a separate, we budget for it separately because you don't know for sure what's going to come in with that and how much growth and how much housing is going to actually be completed in that year. So it kind of is just allocated separately, and it's just, whereas the 8.9 million is properties that are currently already here and have been here since last year. So this is just a reflection of the potential property taxes we could collect from the new houses being added to the district in 2020. So once we know that BC assessment data, and then I can provide a lot more analysis on what that number's looking like and adjust it if required. So on top of the new staffing, I just want to kind of highlight that filling, we have 3 vacant director positions right now. So filling these positions in 2020 will go a long way in helping Souk start to keep up with community growth and do some proactive long-term planning. So I'm really kind of excited to have our CIO position being filled now, so that at least sets the stage, and then we can kind of now drill down from there because, we've been kind of rudderless for a while now, so I think this is going to be a great and exciting 20 year for Souk and the staff here to move forward. So filling those positions will definitely help us provide a bit more stability at the top, which will help kind of direct things going forward. And just as of note, for 2021 and onwards, any additional new positions will be reprioritized this year and funded through this non-market change revenue that we get in until optimal staffing levels are achieved. And once those are done, then we'll can come back and kind of have a better conversation around what would we like to do with non-market revenue going forward. Put it right into reserves, there's options of what we could do with it once we're kind of there. But for the next couple of years, I think we need to focus on kind of getting the staff at the level that we need to provide the services that you guys want to the community out there.
Right. And Councillor St. Pierre, you got a question?
Yes, for the chair. I'm curious because I remember that in the org chart, we had definitely identified senior planner and communication officer as 2 of the top. And we certainly discussed them, I believe, when we were looking at the service review. But I don't recall the environment services tech. And what I'm curious about that, the reason I'm curious about that is because I felt very strongly that we needed to move forward on specifically economic development and trying to prime the pump and actually get some more tax revenue in from and balance our tax base. So I don't remember the discussion around that, and unfortunately, I don't actually know what the environmental services tech does. So I have no feel for whether how important that is compared to the economic development. So I'd love to know a little bit more about what that position entails and how it fits into the services and the needs of the district versus something that would actually increase our revenues overall.
You want to take that?
Yes, I'll take the first part for sure. My understanding at the service level review on November 4th, we did talk about the economic development position, and where I believe we ended up was not pushing that forward as an FTE at this point, but putting some money in the budget for grant writing. And we do have $15,000 in the 2020 budget for that function. So I believe that that's where we ended up with that economic development / grant writer position. The environmental tech position, and I may ask Laura to supplement this, but things like riparian area assessments, invasive plant stuff, the subdivision requirements for environmental checking on subdivision certainly are part of that portfolio, but I see Laura's going to come up in this and throw me a lifeline.
No, that's a really great answer, and
through your worship, I'd just like to add, given the extra workloads of adding climate change action committees, and acknowledging that currently Parks and Environmental Services has one inside worker, and that would be me, going through all the building permits, going through all of the development permits, et cetera, that we do need to review on an ongoing basis. With the growth, it becomes very difficult for one person to handle all of those loads. We do have a good complement of staff as outside workers, but that load is being borne only by one person in-house.
Thank you.
So just to wrap up, I'm quite confident that that stayed at position number 3. And I don't recall getting any advice from council to move that in the ranking.
Go ahead, Ms.
Okay,
Gray.
and also, just to add one more piece of that is, you'll see in the department request is a request to have a membership to the South Island Prosperity Project, which is an economic development group as well. So that can kind of help as a stopgap for 2020. And so we can get into more details on that when we get to that slide.
Thank you.
So that's the staffing piece. So this one, I'll stay on this slide for a bit because this is your resolution that you passed at the November 4th council meeting. So I just wanted to kind of highlight at the meeting, council was provided information about each department and the level of service it provides internally or externally to the community, and was asked to determine if services should increase, decrease, stay the same, if there were any new services council would like the district to provide, or current ones to stop providing. So feedback was provided there, and this resolution was created, and so I'm going to talk to kind of the cost of doing any of these items if there is an applicable cost to them. As I just wanted to kind of highlight, council did make 2 resolutions on that night. There was a 2019-496 regarding the snow removal. So I just want to highlight that the budget impacts of snow removal on public sidewalks in downtown core is included in this resolution. I'm going to speak to how that one's being satisfied through this. But basically, just the quick summary is, there's a $5,000 annual budget for snow removal. And as well, there is emergency road and snow removal reserve fund that has a balance of $150,000 in it. So in the event of a catastrophic blizzard, I believe we should have funds to deal with any kind of emergency snow removal projects. And I believe it was the council didn't want more sidewalks being shoveled that weren't outside of what we currently do. It was more just kind of more information on how this works. So we do have money in the budget every year to fund any snow removal expenses, as well as this reserve fund available. So I think that kind of satisfies that resolution there for now. So the first item on your resolution was for an e-bike. So this has now been included in the budget. The capital cost for that is $3,210. And it's being recommended to fund through the carbon tax rebate reserve. I'm like so excited we can finally use this for something. So there's funds available in that. Every year we file the climate action report with Ministry of Environment, and we get a small rebate check that goes into a reserve fund, and there's approximately $10,000-ish in there. And it has to be used for projects that would reduce emissions, and obviously an e-bike would qualify for that. So that's exciting that we can actually use that fund for something. So that's been included in the budget, and that's the recommendation. On top of that, there is $2,000 in operating costs added to the bylaw budget for this year, just for a uniform and helmets and all that fun stuff that you need to buy. And then that will be dropping to $1,000 of ongoing costs for 2021 and onwards. And the result of that request from council as far as the operating costs go is a 0.07% property tax increase in 2020. The next piece was the assessment of sewer charges based on water usage. So obviously at this point, there's no cost associated with that. I just wanted to highlight that this in 2020 will be reviewed by the Director of Finance and the new Manager of Wastewater that we've recently hired, Cam Priest, and a report to council will come forward in mid to late 2020 to kind of with options of potentially charging sewer not with parcel tax, but based on usage. So we're getting some preliminary data from CRD and can kind of analyze that and come back to council with some recommendations if it's warranted to change the way we're going to charge for the sewer.
Great. And Councillor Bateman, you had a question?
Well, just in terms
Mike.
of process, are we to ask our granular questions at this point? We're going to wait till the end of the presentation, right? And then we'll come back to some of these items? Or,
questions-
Your questions is
Okay.
the time. It's more like if
Yeah.
any sort of resolution should be parked.
all right, this is not a resolution at all. I wanted to clarify regarding this e-bike.
Yes.
Which is probably the easiest thing to cut from this budget and likely will not survive too long. However, I think the idea was to ask bylaw whether it would in fact be useful to their services and purposes. And if indeed they were enthusiastic, and/or parks, I think also was an option for this bike.
Yes,
And
so.
only then entertain the idea.
Correct. So definitely, bylaw was consulted on this, and our bylaw officer, Scott Cullum, was very excited to boot around town on an e-bike. Yeah, he thought it would be with all our parks and trail systems and all of that, so I think at the time I think there was a conversation if it was going to be 2 e-bikes or just one, and we just think realistically, let's try one, see if this actually works, because we do have 2 bylaw officers, and if it's actually being used enough that would warrant 2, we can come back to council, next year and request another one if that's the case. But yes, we definitely had, one of the bylaw officers was very excited to see the e-bike in the budget and include it. And as far as ongoing, the operating expenses are minimal, and the current capital costs can be funded through the carbon tax rebate reserve. So there's no property tax hit for that capital cost of it.
You have a
The next
follow-up?
piece,
Sorry, you have a follow-up question?
Well, my only point there would be the KRIP fund. Is that not a decision for the Climate Action Committee to determine how it would like to?
that's not currently the way the bylaws are written, but
Okay.
but again, yeah, I mean, that's probably what we're here. That's the recommendation. So if you guys
Right.
would like to do something differently or fund it a different way,
Okay.
open to that conversation for sure.
Limited funds in that.
Yes. Okay, and so then the third one was reviewing of staffing for parks to manage all the new parks that we've inherited or received from developers over the years and new facilities. So included in the budget is an additional $60,000 of salary in the parks budget, and this would be to fund 2 new auxiliary parks workers that would be hired as if when required. And just again, just as Laura was kind of mentioning, just to kind of help maintain all the property that we have. It's ever growing, and we haven't really hired any new auxiliary workers in quite a few years, as far as my understanding is. So this is definitely more of an expensive item. The property tax increase for that would be 0.75%, if the full budget was approved.
And Councillor St. Pierre, you have a question?
Through the chair. I'm just curious because in conversation with Ms. Hooper, I understood that there was need for a carpenter, at least having someone on call who could actually quickly assess issues, deal with them, and avoid, damage to our infrastructure. Is this one of the positions being considered, maybe?
Defer to Ms. Hooper.
Through your worship, it is on the strategic plan or the org chart over the next couple of years. We did have to prioritize through as the management team, and it is on the list, but it's just not considered a high priority. The laborers in question would just be that for green space laborers, relatively unskilled workers, but skilled in a lot of great ways, but not in carpentry.
Okay, and then the next bullet in there was for street lighting. So there's no recommendation of budget increase for this to satisfy this resolution. Engineering department feels strongly that this can be managed within the existing budget, and if there is specific areas that we need or there's a desire to have more streetlights on, we just need to enter calls for service, and then we can go and address that. So at this point in time, no budget increase is recommended for that. We think it's just maybe a better awareness of that this is there and we can do this. And we can come back maybe in 2021 if we realize, we need to increase the budget or do something different. But right now, we feel fairly confident we can manage that within the current budget that we have. Community grants funding. So this There's no recommendation to increase it from the original 2020 budget. 2019 was a bit of an anomaly just because commitments council made throughout 2018 that actually applied to 2019, and there's no direction given of where they were supposed to be funded from. So that was why there was that kind of awkward exchange in February of how are we going to fund these, and were they supposed to come from community grants or not. So community grants is in the budget at $90,000 for 2020. And, I think that's a very generous budget in there. So there's not a recommendation to increase that going forward and just more manage the requests within that budget, so that there's nothing been added there. Again, just because 2019 was kind of a weird anomaly there, which is why there wasn't as much funds available as there normally would have been. Council contingency. So it was, just wanted to hear kind of a couple options for increasing or decreasing. So me being the finance person, I say we leave it as is. The pros being there's no increase to taxpayers, leaving it as is. It's currently what's in the budget. It's already was in last year's budget, so we're maintaining status quo for that. And it encourages council to stay on budget and just definitely prioritize your asks. The cons of that, of course, would be you may not cover all the expenses that council would like to support in 2020. There's always more asks than there is money, and I think council can, know the funds that are available in there and can really prioritize when these one-off requests come in of how do you want to fund that, and is this a priority for this year, or is this something that maybe they can come back in 2021 and we can address it at that time. So there is no increase recommended in there. I'm suggesting leave it at the $80,000 and try and manage it within that and see how we do and revisit next year if necessary. Increased committee support. So this is a new item being added. For now, because there's a bit of unknown, and council is talking about committees at future meeting, I believe. There's going to be a bit more deep dive into committees. How many? What are we going to do? How is it going to work? So for now, there's just a placeholder of $7,500 added to the 2020 to 2024 budget as a line item kind of going forward, just to kind of have a placeholder for some committee support as if when to be determined what that could be used for. But just to know, there is something in there that once that committee structure and numbers have been settled, we can have a better conversation about what kind of support would any of these committees need financially, and then factor that into future budgets. But at least for now, there's something included in 2020 to provide some funds to some of the current committees.
And maybe yourself or perhaps our CEO can answer this question. What had staff advised was the possible number of committees we could maintain without an addition of a position?
I believe the corporate officer said it's not necessarily the number of committees there. There were some parameters around that, but I think where the corporate officer is comfortable is about 4 committees that we can support on an ongoing basis.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Bateman, you had a question earlier?
No, I guess we'll discuss
Mike?
the council budget in some depth
Yes.
when we look at it later,
Yes.
so I'll bring it up then.
Thank you.
And so the cost, property tax impact of that is 0.09% to add the $7,500 into the budget. The second to last item was reprioritizing the economic development and grant writer. So to kind of satisfy that for the next couple years until we're a little more stable in our staffing and have more plans to understand what we need to do here is there's $15,000 being included in the CAO's budget to hire a grant writer under contract as if when required, and that's included for 2020 and 2021. And as well as there's a request for membership to the South Island Prosperity Project, which provides economic development to the community. So kind of reactivating that membership, I think, will help get the conversation going in 2020, which will help kind of allow staff to provide council more information on the benefits of actually having a full-time employee doing this for the district, or is there other ways we can satisfy the needs of council there. And then the last item is the removal of the town core parking lease. So that was easy. So the contract expires in July, so the option would just be not to renew that contract. And so that'll result in 2020 of $12,000 worth of savings, which is a 0.15% property tax savings.
Go ahead, Councillor St. Pierre.
Through the chair, I'm just curious how that'll affect parking for the farmers, what do they call it again? Farmers, not country market.
So
Sorry, not
I
farmers
think
market.
before we took this lease on, they were already participating there. So we discussed that, and Ms. Hooper may want to take over so I don't butcher it. But they have an arrangement already with the property owner. Whereas our lease is actually what we've obtained that lease for, we're not allowed to do based off the zoning.
So it wouldn't affect that?
That is my understanding, is that they had a pre-existing relationship and that us not renewing our lease shouldn't affect that relationship. And then as well, I believe the market that currently takes place there was talks of connecting with them and potentially putting it in the park here or a different location.
And perhaps RCO could speak to that?
Yes, I have been, I've met with the group twice now and actually exchanged emails this morning. So we will be meeting to talk about their needs going forward. The unfortunate part about the lease expiring in the summertime is right in the middle of market season.
Right.
So they don't want to start somewhere and end up at a different location for this season. So we're going to have that discussion within the next few days here to see what are some options for them to start so they can start booking their vendors for the upcoming season.
Of course, that's great. I know we mentioned perhaps just doing it next door.
It would be ideal. We've got water there now. We have a
Washrooms,
washroom there now. I believe, I haven't vetted this with everyone, but I don't think it's inconceivable that they could use the parking lot here on a Saturday morning for parking. So it seems the stars seem to be aligning for John Phillips Park, but we'll see if that's the way it plays out.
Super, thank you. Councillor Logans?
Thank you. I just wanted to go back a couple steps because I didn't quite catch the percentage increase for the e-bike portion of this slide. Was it 0.7 or 0.07?
0.07.
Okay, I thought that was like, that 0.7 doesn't make sense.
No, yeah.
Thank you.
Little Rich, yeah, 0.07. Yeah, and just as of note, like approximately $78,000 of expenses equals a 1% property tax increase, give or take. But just as a ballpark figure, that's something to keep in mind. So that, I believe, kind of satisfies the council resolution and all the requests and asks. And as I mentioned, any cost increases have been included in the current budget in front of you. So next, I'm going to talk about outside organization requests. So School District 62, they've sent a request in for an additional, and all these numbers in front of you are in addition to the current budget. They're not the budget, it's an additional. So they're requesting an additional $9,000 for the crossing guard budget. We currently fund $14,000 a year for crossing guards for Souk. And they've sent a letter in just advising that, and for 14,000 has been, we paid them that for many, many years. It hasn't increased every year. So they're just requesting just due to increased costs and as well as the desire to employ an additional crossing guard in Souk. They would like the district to contribute an additional $9,000 on top of the $14,000 for their crossing guard program.
And does this $9,000, does it go into a pool that's split up among schools, or is this specifically for Souk school crossing guards?
My understanding is it's for Souk school crossing guards. I had the same kind of question as well, and I was going to possibly clarify, but that was just the request we got in. But that's my understanding is there's, I've seen a list of the schools that it provides for, and it is like John Muir and the local schools. So, but I think it was just warrants a confirmation that if we did contribute this $9,000, it's not just to School District 62. It will actually be for a Souk school crossing guard. But that just wasn't exactly clear in their letter, but that's been their request. And so presumably that's the intent, is they would like to hire a new crossing guard for Souk. And that's the additional funds that they would like, that they're requesting to fund that. So that, again, these have been included in the budget in front of you, so that results in a 0.12% property tax increase. The next piece is police victim services, as she mentioned. I've been in conversations with people, the office staff from Victim Services, and basically they're requesting an additional, on top of our current budget of, currently we fund them $8,300 a year. They're requesting an increase in funding to $20,000 on top, sorry. They're requesting an additional $20,000 on top of the current $8,000 that they receive a year. And as she alluded to, there's a kind of a long, complicated history of to why we weren't funding what we were supposed to be funding. But historically, there was a difference of opinion between the province, police, and the district on how this should be funded. And unfortunately, at the result of this, it resulted in the Victim Services Organization having to supplement the underpayment internally because they still had this worker working and being paid, and because district wasn't contributing their fair share. And I've had lots of conversations and looked into it with the other municipalities and what they fund, and I don't think that this request is unreasonable. It does make us equal with how this position is funded across other municipalities, between what the province funds and what the district funds. So it's not out of scope for what other municipalities are doing. So
And just for my own clarity, so we're looking at essentially $28,000 a year with a 2% increase every year?
correct. So that's, you'll see that that budget sits in the community safety portion of the budget. And so you'll see that number. There's a separate line item for victim services, and so you'll see that bump up every year, and that's factoring in a 2% increase every year. Just cost of living and inflation potential.
Thank you.
So if this is approved, that has resulted in a 0.26% increase to property taxes. I just briefly touched on, Ms. Logan's, the victim services. So this results in a 0.26% property tax increase for, if approved. And as I just briefly mentioned, that it's not unreasonable what the request is. It's in line with how other municipalities fund this position, and it's just to differences of opinion, we've been underfunding it for years, so that's resulted in them supplementing it themselves internally with their own funds. And then the final big ask, of course, is for the EMCS theater seats. They're requesting up to $45,000 towards the replacement of the seats. The district, they're requesting the district contribute 1/3 of the cost for the replacement of their seats. The school district has agreed to fund a third. I can't remember now. It's blanking where the other third was coming from. Fundraising, thank you. Fundraising for a third, and then they're requesting the district to fund the other third of approximately $45,000. So if this is a big hit, this would be 0.58% property tax increase if approved at the full value.
Right. Go ahead, Councilor Bateman.
So just to be clear,
Mike.
School District 62 is contributing $40,000, and EMCS Society Reserve Fund is putting in $50,000. And the EMCS Society is organizing a series of fundraising events and a public outreach buy a seat kind of campaign.
Yes.
And so seeking up to $45,000.
Correct. So $45,000 has been included in the budget in front of you. You'll see in your council section, it's a separate line item being included in there, a one-time addition. So it's up for consideration, obviously. So those are the outside requests that the district has received this year to be implemented for 2020. So now I'm going to get into department requests. So these are kind of a combo of department requests either to satisfy the resolution from the November 4th meeting or to achieve the goals in your strategic plan. And as well, I noted in the November 4th meeting, there was a lot of discussion points about some expenses that didn't necessarily make a resolution, but they do potentially have a financial impact. So I just wanted to kind of address them in here and make you aware of if what you were saying, if that's what you want to do, then this is kind of the cost of doing those. So all of these numbers in front of you are like the increase to the current budget. So there's a combo of kind of those three inputs. So for council, There was a discussion at the November 4th meeting to keep travel status quo, but 2019 was at $40,000 because of the election year and anticipating that more council were going to attend more events. So that's why it was bumped up. And then it was originally in the budget to drop to $30,000 for 2020. So if you would like to keep it status quo at $40,000, then that's a potential, would be a $10,000 increase to the budget, which is a 0.13% property tax increase. So it's just something to consider if you want to leave it at status quo for $40,000. Because like I said, I believe with the election, the thought was more council would be traveling to more events in 2019, and then potentially for 2020 and onwards, there would be potentially less council traveling to some of the events.
Go ahead, Councillor Loggins.
Thank you. Yeah, in my mind, it was status quo from previous years and how it was consistently sort of the same, and then acknowledging that that bump was a one-time bump.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the rest of council thinks. That's
Yeah.
kind of what the impression that I
unanimous
had.
with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that's definitely an adjustment we can consider, and that will be a little bit of savings there. So it's just the way the minutes were recorded was that you would like to keep it status quo. So keeping it status quo would actually be a $10,000 increase from what it was currently budgeted at for 2020.
Sorry, just to clarify, we, I think, are under the understanding of the opposite.
Okay, perfect.
We will have a conversation later.
Yeah, so you can confirm that that would definitely be an adjustment we can make to the budget that will result in some property tax savings. So if you would like to go back down to the $30,000. The other item that was talked about was additional funding for community events. So there is an additional $10,000 included in 2020 budget for the Lions to provide the Lumberjack Show at Canada Day events. So that's a 0.13% property tax increase that council's already agreed to, so that's been included in the budget. Okay. Next is CAO. So CAO request is $16.4 thousand for a membership to the South Island Prosperity Project. They're an economic development group designed to create jobs, increase senior government funding to the region, bring First Nations to get into the local economy. A bit more of the history, obviously I don't know all of it because I wasn't here at the time, but the district used to fund the Chamber of Commerce up to $28,000 a year. And then back at the end of 2016, the Chamber said they couldn't provide these services anymore, so they requested us to stop funding them for that. So since then, we've kind of haven't belonged to any organization, and at that time, they had suggested that the district join the South Island Prosperity Project. And just doing a bit of Google research, it looks like out of all the local municipalities, Souk, Langford, and potentially one other were the only ones that hadn't actually joined this group. So Metchosin, wasn't Metchosin? Yes. So that's just being recommended to have Souk join this organization that will help with some economic development planning going forward. The other request is $10,000 increase for legal. And this is, again, I'm just trying to get the budgets to be realistic of what we actually spend on legal. So instead of creating budget pressures to other departments, so $10,000 is being requested to be increased because this reflects the actual cost of doing business. And as it grows, legal is an important thing to consider and make sure we're doing things correctly going forward so things don't come back later and become a problem for us. So the $10,000 would be a 0.13% property tax increase. As well, discussed at the November 4th meeting was an opportunity for community capacity building in relation to community engagement. So I just wanted to highlight that this will be reviewed by the CAO in 2020 and any advice, recommendations be brought forward if applicable. The last one for this slide is Human HR Office Admin. As I mentioned, the property maintenance budget, building budget sits with this department. And so we're requesting a $50,000 increase to the budget for the anticipated needs once the results of the building condition assessment are known. This is again kind of the problem with not having the long-term planning is we don't have reserve funds to kind of pay for new roofs and things like that we require here, HVAC system upgrades, wear and tear on the building, restructuring. So that's just the request to increase that based on the anticipated costs. The result of that is a 0.65% property tax increase. So it's a big number, but it's also this building needs in need of some repairs, and once we have the result of the building condition assessment, that can really help us prioritize what our projects are going to be, because there's other departments as well that would like to do some building repairs down at the Parks office. Fire would like to do some repairs to some of their outbuildings as well. So just requesting to increase the budget overall so that we can have some more funds to renovate and improve the offices as required. So the next department is legislative services. So they're requesting an additional $10,000 for increased professional development, and this is just due to increased cost and increased staff. They have a new staff member that was added in 2019. And as far as professional development is concerned, each department kind of has their own professional development budget, but I think a conversation we'll kind of undertake in 2020 is kind of reassessing how best to allocate those funds if we kind of just give each department a smaller PD budget and have a general corporate training budget potentially that could be used to kind of support staff in any kind of more expensive training they need. But none of those conversations have really happened or materialized yet, and I believe we're going to be talking about a new training policy in 2020, so that will kind of dictate a report back to council at some point to kind of advise on what we might recommend on how to better manage those funds going forward. So for now, it's just kind of each department has been asking to increase their professional development slightly.
Councillor Logans?
Sorry to do this to you, Ms. Gray. Could we go back just a little bit? I had a question about the SIPP membership. I just searched their website really quickly, and it says that the Sault Chamber of Commerce is a member. Did they talk to us at all about that since their delegation, do you know?
I'm not sure. I believe the Sault Chamber of Commerce is coming on Monday,
On Monday?
to council.
Oh, good. We can ask them then. Okay.
Yes, so
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure on that. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so as I mentioned, you'll see most of the departments are kind of asking for a bump in their professional development. And so I think maybe we can have a better conversation about this in 2020 on how to better manage those funds potentially if we have, like I said, different buckets for each department, and then more of a corporate fund for more expensive professional development or education training that staff would like to undertake. $500 for memberships, just minor. Yeah, $500 for memberships, and again, they just have another staff member on board, so on their team. So it's just a slight increase, and as well as membership fees go up every year. So it's just kind of getting the budget back in line with what those membership fees actually are. 0.01. Well, not even 0.01, 0.00 something. I've rounded it up to 0.01. So it's pretty minor, obviously. Of course, you'll like this. So they got some savings that they're recommending. They would like to reduce the election budget by $5,750. And this is because, like, really, like the amount that currently was in the budget isn't sufficient if we had to do an interim election, like unfortunately we had to do this year after Ms. Parkinson passed away. So either way, like, those costs are just going to have to be managed internally through other savings or other avenues. So saving the budget in this area isn't really a good use of money when it can be used for other departments and other expenses. So they've requested to reduce their budget, and then you'll see in 2022 there is a bump up in that budget when the actual full-blown election happens. So it's just kind of reallocating those funds to somewhere that it can actually be better used rather than sitting in this bucket that we don't end up using more often than not. And then the other big ask is request is to reduce their advertising budget by $18,000. And that's basically to reflect kind of actual spending, and as well, they're proposing to kind of change the way that we advertise council meetings in the local paper, because there's no requirement to do that, and it's quite expensive. And then doing the advertisements for special meetings can be a challenge if anything changes with that, because you have to put the ads in so many, there's cutoff times for putting the ads in. So we're just trying to look at a better way to advertise for the district. And as well, once the communications coordinator is hired, I think they can provide some input on better ways to engage with the community and use those funds in a more appropriate way. So the election budget reduction would result in property tax savings of approximately 0.08%, and then the advertising is 0.24% of savings. Yeah, so that would be the advertising. So, it's a big reduction in the budget, but I think Ms. Machado has done a lot of work to try and really be realistic about how we're going to do this, and there's better ways to do it. So if we can save some funds, I appreciate her finding ways to do that.
Councillor St. Pierre?
Through the chair, I'm just curious about whether or not the communication officer is going to have a budget of their own for, I mean, obviously, we're hoping this person's actually communicating effectively with the public. How's that being handled? How are they being resourced?
Not a budget per se right now, but we do have some money in council contingency. We do have, we think that we can do professional development within the Office of the CAO budget. You'll see a more fulsome communications budget in the 2021 budget in front of council, but right now, just getting the person in the seat, doing some planning on what actually we want this position to entail. Out of the gate, I see a little bit of both communication and public engagement, and depending on where we go with that, I think public engagement may be a little bit more resource dependent than street communication. So we have prorated that position for 2020, and we think that within the Office of the CAO budget, we have enough to implement it in year one and bring back a better budget for resources in 2021.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Next department would be bylaw. So as I mentioned, just increasing the protective clothing budget and supplies for anything we might need for the e-bike to outfit the bylaw officer with their proper protective equipment. So the $1,000 for the protective clothing is rounded, a 0.01% property tax increase. Supplies is 0.01, obviously that's 0.00 something. But again, it's just kind of reflect the cost for an e-bike. And as if this happens and we buy it and go through, obviously we'll know a little more after 2020, how much does it actually end up costing us for supplies or anything. So this is just kind of to have some money set aside for any potential purchases that would need to be required for that. And then the last piece is just recommending increasing the vehicle maintenance by $500. The idea being, you'll see in a couple slides down here, is fire is requesting an addition, purchasing a new truck, and then the idea being the old truck will be moved to bylaw so they can have two vehicles available to them. Okay, and then finance. So finance is just a smaller increase to the professional development budget of $2,500. And this is just due to, again, increased costs of courses and training that's offered year over year. And as well as we're really hoping we're going to be fully staffed in 2020. So that will just be an additional staff member that potentially has their designation that would need to partake in some training to maintain their designation. So that's a 0.03% property tax increase. Memberships is increased again, just the cost of doing of belonging to myself. I belong to the CPA organization, so there's just an annual cost for that. So it's just kind of bumping that up to reflect the memberships for two staff. And then the bigger one is insurance, which is $27,500. And this is just trying to bring the budget up to actual premiums. We get our annual bill, and there's not really a lot of negotiation we can do for our premiums. We get our insurance MIA invoice as well as from our other provider, and so this is just trying to get the budget back in line with what these premiums. They've always, they go up year over year, and the budget just hasn't been following along with that. So this is just trying to get it back in line with what the insurance is actually costing the district every year. So that one is a 0.36% increase, and again, that one would be hard to kind of. If we don't increase the budget here, we'll just have to try and fund it other ways because the actual premiums we're getting charged. So there's not a lot of wiggle room or negotiation that we can do on that. And then the other thing that was discussed at the November 4th meeting was an incentive program to file homeowner grants online. And I just wanted to highlight that this will be reviewed by the Director of Finance in 2020. And we'll kind of look at options to help reduce the number of cars coming into the district to drop off their homeowner grant paper copies. So which will kind of help our carbon footprint and climate. Thinking of you, Tony. So we'll kind of look at that and kind of, if we have any good news stories, kind of definitely kind of track that and present something to council later on in 2020. The next department is IT. So it's, they're requesting a $15,000 increase in software licensing. And this is just due to a combination of licensing costs just go up, as well as we've got multiple new staff. So staff need licenses to Office and Tempest and other systems that we run internally. We're trying to do more and more things online with computer systems, so they all have a licensing component to it. So it's just, again, trying to get the cost in line with the additional new staff we've hired and potentially for the 3 other new staff that we're anticipating coming on board in 2020. So that is a 0.2% property tax increase. And then the other ask is IT kind of manages the budget for the equipment. And so they're requesting a $2,200 increase for equipment lease. And this is just the potential need to lease a new plotter. The current plotter we have, which is like this big mapping printer, cool machine, is 8 years old now. It's broken down twice this year. So it's critical to most of the departments for printing maps and scanning documents and things. So when it breaks down, it really kind of is a detriment to the staff and causes a lot more time, a delay in staff providing services. Exactly. So, and further on, there's kind of requests to kind of increase mapping and things. So it's just the potential of, there's a new model coming out in 2020. So the idea being just to have some budget room there if it looks feasible to replace the current plotter with a new one. So next is planning. So planning is requesting $25,000 for a consultant to be hired when council directs special projects to be completed throughout the year. Like, for example, something for 2019 was the Lot A charrette and thank you, that's the word I was looking for. The due diligence work for Lot A that council requested be completed and that we needed to complete in order to kind of move forward with our planning for Lot A. So those were not budgeted for expenses. So currently we manage them through council contingency. So this is just a request to kind of have a budget available that we don't have to use contingency for to fund these going forward. So if approved as is, that's a 0.32% property tax increase. Again, planning has $5,000 in professional development requested. And this is just strictly due to increased costs and increased staffing because we will now, with the new org structure, have a director of planning, a senior planner, 2 planner 2s, and a planning assistant. Thank you. So it's just being fully staffed. Planning has kind of been understaffed for quite a few years, so it's just the hope is to finally get them fully staffed this year. So that's a 0.07% property tax increase. So it's approved as is.
Thank you. Councillor St. Pierre, your question?
Through the chair, either to anybody really. In terms of the 25K for consulting, it sounds a lot like a planning contingency fund. And I'm just curious as to whether or not this might make more sense to just simply keep in council contingency, which would allow us more latitude to use it for any number of different things without actually necessarily increasing council contingency as much as 25K, and then still having that available for any sort of planning contingency needs. So just
Yeah, and I think that's partly why we're here talking about it, is just to determine the priorities of it. It's just the department's asked it, so we're putting it forward. It's included in the budget, so it's something for council to consider and decide if that's their priority or if they would like to try and manage any of those kind of expenses or requests in 2020 through council contingency or through other funds. The other request was for memberships, and again, this is just resulting in the full staff, the department being fully staffed and just having the applicable memberships to the Planning Institute, et cetera, covered. And so that's a 0.03% property tax increase. And then the other thing that was discussed at the November 4th meeting was kind of related to planning, was the increased commercial development and affordable housing approval timelines. And so I just want to highlight that this will be reviewed by the Director of Planning and Development in 2020, and anything, any recommendations or anything will be brought forward to council in 2020 if applicable. And the other thing that was included was the request to prioritize the OCP. So I just want to highlight that there is $125,000 included in 2020's budget for phase one of the OCP, and then 2021 and 2022 includes funds in there because obviously the OCP is a multi-year project. It's not going to be completed in 1 year. So there is funds in the budget to undertake the OCP, and as well as what's being recommended is to, I believe it's in 2021, create a master planning reserve fund. So we can kind of have funds going in there every year to pay for when we have to renew OCPs, parks and trails, transportation. There's other departments that kind of want to do some master planning as well. So that's a recommendation, is that, we create a reserve fund for that can be used in future when these reports come up. So it's not just a big surprise. Here's another, large expense, because especially for the OCP, it's an expensive undertaking, but critical to the district. So. And the next is subdivision. I just have a minor request for a $700 increase to memberships. And again, this is just reflecting the actual costs of the memberships that the staff belong to. And that's a 0.01% property tax increase for that. Moving right along, building. So the building department is requesting an additional $5,500 for professional development. And this is a critical piece I'm personally supportive of. This is to pay for the inspectors to do their training. There is changes to the code that require level 3 certification to sign off on building permits by February 2021. So currently, our 2 building inspectors don't have their level 3. So this is basically, they're currently in 2019 undertaking their level 2 certification officially, or retaking it, because the program is, they got their certification years ago. The program has changed significantly, so they're just kind of retaking their level 1 this year. So this budget would allow them to then take level 2 in 2020 to be, at least have one of them, hopefully, ideally, having their level 3 by 2021. We also have our chief building official who does have his level 3 as well, but it's just nice to have more than one person that does have this level 3 and can sign off officially on all the building permit options. So this is a 0.07% property tax increase for that. And then the other 3 requests are just minor requests for, because building has 2 vehicles now. They received, fire got 1 new truck this year, so their old truck has gone down to the building department. So now both our building inspectors have a truck and they can go out to inspection separately. Previously, we only had 1 truck for them. So it was they would go out and do inspections at one, but it was just not the best use of everyone's time, because sometimes one of them was stuck at a site if the other inspector hadn't finished their inspections yet, where now they can kind of book things and go separately to inspections and kind of get more done, and it's more efficient use of everyone's time. So there's just minor increases requested just to reflect the actual cost of having them have 2 vehicles available to them. And then a couple requests from GIS, Geographic Information Services. Just a small increase, $500 for office supplies. And this is just anticipating more toner for the plotter. Just as council has kind of requested more maps and more public things available, we just weren't sure if this is going to be paper maps or if this is online things. But either way, they've just requested a small bump just to include any applicable office supply increases. And then as well, $1,000 is being requested for professional development, and it's just to reflect the actual training costs of what it takes to go on their training. And then parks. So Parks has, one more point about GIS. As I mentioned at the November 4th meeting, there was discussion around the desire to increase and enhance maps available to the public. So I just want to highlight, this will be reviewed in 2020 by the Director of Operations. And then discussions can happen with council to just confirm what the idea intent behind was at, and just come up with ideas and recommendations on how to better enhance our mapping and our public input or public availability of these maps. And that I can see more paper maps posted places potentially, as well as just either better online access to the maps and such. And on top of that as well, that's why the new plotter is being considered to be leased for 2020, is just to help make sure we have the proper technology to meet those needs. Okay, so parks. Lots of kind of ins and outs here. There's a reduction of $18,000 for the, because we didn't renew the boat launch lease. That was in the budget currently, so that's going to result in a savings of 0.24% of property taxes. Sorry, yeah.
When you say boat launch, do you mean the boat trailer parking lot? Boat trailer parking lot on the South Maple?
Correct.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
just to be clear.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
And as well, Parks is requesting reducing their banners budget of $8,200, which will result in savings of 0.11%. This is normally being managed through the seasonal adornment budget, so it just didn't kind of make sense to just keep a line item there that we don't need, and the funds can be used for other expenses. There's a request for $1,000 for community cleanup events. So these are for things like the Knotweed Cleanup Project. And so it's just a minor bump up, just so again, we have more parks and areas to maintain. So I'm just trying to keep on top of that, and hosting the community events is kind of a nice way to get the public involved and helping support that. So that would be a rounded 0.01% property tax increase from that. $5,000 is being requested for hazardous vegetation control. And again, this is just strictly related to, there's more parkland to maintain, and costs are increasing to do that. So the $5,000 is a 0.07% property tax increase. $11,000 is being requested for professional development. And this is to reflect the cost of the training required by the parks workers, and to account for potentially 2 new auxiliary staff to be trained up in all the safety training that the parks workers need to undertake to be out in the community, and the parks providing that. So that is a 0.14% property tax increase. They're requesting reducing the vehicle maintenance by $5,000, just again, reflecting actual spend. It hasn't been costing us that, so we just want to repurpose the budget to other areas that have a higher need for that. And so that's a 0.07% property tax savings. A slight bump up to travel of $2,000. Again, just more staff, more traveling being required. That would be a 0.03% property tax increase. Materials and supplies, it's $10,000 increases being requested to account for increased costs to maintain the parks. Every year we have more parks being added to under that the municipality is required to maintain. And just the budget over the years hasn't been keeping pace. So the budget did bump up in 2019, and we're asking for a smaller increase in 2020 just to kind of help reflect the actual costs of maintaining that.
Councillor Logans?
I'm wondering if we could have Ms. Hooper come and speak more about the last 3 items, the travel, maintenance, material, supplies, and vehicle fuel, that sort of thing. Oh, and a bit about the professional development too, because it'll be interesting to know what sorts of training the new staff will be undergoing and that sort of thing.
Sure. Through your worship to Councillor Logans. I'll just have to get you to repeat the question as we go along, but I'll start with professional development. Training and professional development a lot of it's a WCB requirement, so we do chainsaw certifications, first aid, all those sorts of things that have to be renewed on a regular basis. In addition to that, we do have to do playground inspection certifications and keep everybody up to date on that, pesticide applicator's license. So with increased number of staff, we have to run those programs when we get new staff, sometimes if they don't come to us trained, but we also have to keep those certifications up. In addition, one thing that hadn't been mentioned is I was historically positioned and correct me if I'm wrong, under the engineering departments, professional development, and memberships, et cetera. And now that my wage and I've become in Parks and Environmental Services, you're going to see a jump in that as a result. I don't think you see much of a jump in engineering, but that's one of them. So when it comes to materials and supplies, that includes things like garbage disposal, which has gone up. We've increased the number of receptacles. We've increased the number of bathrooms that need to be maintained. So simple things like cleaning supplies, toilet paper, pumping out those septic systems when we need to pump them out. That's where you're seeing that increase in material supplies, mulch, et cetera. What were the other parts of the question?
And
Travel. So that's related to education and training. So sometimes this travel is on the mainland. Playground certification doesn't get offered here very often. If we can't do it online, we have to go and travel to those situations. We don't always use it, but it's nice to have that opportunity to have it if we need it. Here.
Okay. So then the last piece of that is fuel, just an additional increase for fuel. And that's just the rising fuel costs.
Councillor St. Pierre speak.
It's just a further question for Ms. Hooper. I'm curious about the community cleanup events because there's been some talk about potentially using the parks more thoroughly in terms of events, having more events, and potentially, I think there was some talk about having parks actually handle a zero waste or offering zero waste options and potentially having equipment. $1,000 doesn't look like it would quite cover that, but I'm curious as to whether or not that's moving in that direction.
Through your worship, the addition, so the community cleanup budget that we have is currently quite appropriate for those kind of events. And we can generally accommodate the initiatives, say, for example, like those zero waste. The $1,000 addition was in line with a grant request that we've made as a way to engage the community for the Japanese knotweed problem we have on the Souk River. And so we've applied for a grant for about $4,000 or $5,000. We need to have some in-kind finance as well for this grant that's going to be hopefully awarded early 2020. So that's where that $1,000 is needed to accommodate that education event and outreach event. Welcome.
Okay. So then that would be it for parks, and I just wanted to highlight again that the snow and ice removal was discussed at length on November 4th, so I think we've addressed that, and hopefully you're satisfied that we can definitely manage and stay on top of that with our existing budget and potentially access to reserves if required. As well, what was talked about on November 4th was increased info on parks and trails available to the community. And so I just want to highlight that this will be addressed in the Parks and Trails Master Plan, and the manager of parks position can kind of come back to council with any advice or recommendations or good news stories of how we're going to be doing this better. So then the next piece is just going to touch on wastewater. Again, as I mentioned, wastewater doesn't affect property taxes. It's just funded through the sewer parcel tax, which is fully self-funded, and there's a couple of reserve funds in the sewer. So there is no property tax input to that, but I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the changes to the sewer budget beyond what was in 2019. So thankfully, we have a new manager of wastewater, Mr. Priest, who is going to provide some great advice and guidance and mentorship to the wastewater and help us kind of move forward and better plan for any changes or expansions and future capital projects to the sewer. So part of that is a $25,000 increase to the contractors and consultant budget. And that's just reflecting the increased cost of sewer projects, and as well, some of the projects that had originally been allocated to capital aren't really capital, so we're just kind of moving them to the correct bucket. They're more just ongoing operating costs, not capital projects. And so again, this is all managed through the sewer parcel tax, so there's no need to do anything with property taxes for this. $10,000 for materials and supplies. Again, this is just to account for increasing cost for managing all the supplies that we need to buy. All costs usually go up every year for everything, so this is just getting the budget more in line with what it's actually costing for all the supplies and chemicals and et cetera that the treatment plant needs to purchase to maintain the plant. And then an additional $1,800 for vehicle fuel. we have, we're hiring, we have competition currently to hire one more wastewater operator. So it's just anticipated that that will give us the opportunity to be out in the community more and visiting the lift stations more proactively and doing more inspections and things. So it's just reflecting on top of fuel costs just going up every year, just that we actually will be planning on hopefully being out in the community more and dealing with things going out in the community and just driving around more. The other thing that was talked about at the November 4th meeting was just an analysis of the HL Heartland land costs, which is HL is the company and they haul the waste to Heartland for us. And so it's approximately $165,000 a year that we spend on that. And we're anticipating that hopefully the new centrifuge will help reduce that cost because it will spin the waste and make it more drier so it's not as heavy. And unfortunately for 2019, the costs were higher than usual because the centrifuge did break down. So the waste was not as dry as it normally is, so it was heavier and it's based on weight. So, but again, so it's just kind of saying, we're kind of on top of that and the manager of wastewater will be looking at those costs and obviously looking at any ways to try and reduce them if possible. But again, the new centrifuge, which should be installed in 2020, should kind of help make the waste leaving the treatment plant to be a little lighter than it is currently. And just briefly touching on, as you'll see in the budget, the district is exploring the option for sewer expansion. So that's going to be a big, complicated conversation to happen. But it's been in the budget, and now the conversations are kind of actively happening on that. So stay tuned for more information coming for that as we know what's going on. But definitely we'll be looking into applying for some grants to help fund any expansion of the sewer. So as we know more information, we'll kind of report back to council and make sure everyone's in the loop of what's going on and the progress we're making with that. So then the next one, before we start getting into capital, is community safety. So this is the fire and police budgets sit there. So they've got a bunch of little kind of ins and outs on their budget. So I won't kind of go into massive detail about all of them, but it's $1,000 for increased professional development. And that's they have a new permanent firefighter that was hired, so it's just reflecting the additional professional development that person would be taking as well. An additional $400 for volunteer training. It's more ESS members, so it's just a slight increase in there just to fund the cost for that. Additional $2,000 were being requested for staff training, and that's again just with new staff being hired, just anticipating the increased costs related to that. So that's a 0.03% property tax increase related to that. Again, and then a $2,000 request for travel increase. Again, just new staff traveling to courses and et cetera, which will result in more travel claims being made to the district. They're requesting reducing their driver certification budget by $200, and that's just to reflect the actual costs of what that driver certification is costing the district. There's a request for $5,000 for the CREST system. Again, that one is just to reflect the actual cost of the CREST system that we get invoiced for. And that's a 0.07% property tax increase. At the November 4th meeting, there was discussed about ensuring there is funds available for the volunteer outside mechanic. And so this is a volunteer that kind of comes to the fire hall and helps maintain the fire trucks. And I think I'm 100% sure I don't believe they were getting paid before, so it's just an acknowledgement of this person is providing the service for us on a volunteer basis, but at least providing them a small fee to help, compensate them for the time and effort involved in coming in and helping us maintain the fire trucks. Because potentially, obviously, taking them to an auto mechanic would cost probably a lot more than what this person is doing it for us on a volunteer basis. So the $1,000 is a 0.01% property tax increase. There's $6,000 being requested for other outside services, and this will include Target Solutions record management system, and that's a 0.08% property tax increase. The next two items are kind of just reallocating the budget, the $3,000 in and out. It's just reallocating the budget to the actual buckets that those expenses get charged to. So it's $3,000 out of turnout gear replacement and $3,000 being moved to the other personal protective equipment budget. The bigger ticket item ask is the $30,000 for a consultant for a master plan. And so this is for a master plan that would address, it's needed as a result of prior council requests to do long-term staffing planning, a 10-minute response time, and fire underwriters insurance, a paid-on-call system. So fire's just requesting $30,000 to kind of hire a consultant to start that master planning work. And that would be a 0.39% property tax increase. The last item is $5,000 for fire hydrant painting. This is a new item, and it's to support hydrant painting. Apparently, this wasn't normally done by the district in the past, but this is perhaps Mr. Mount can speak to it better, but it's basically a request to increase the budget to add a line item for $5,000 to undertake painting of the fire hydrants in the district of Sauk. And so that would result in a 0.07% property tax increase.
Councillor Logan?
Thank you. A couple of things. I definitely would like to hear from Chief Mount more about the consultant master plan. I know there'll probably be a lot of questions from the public on that. Oh, look at that. Ask and you shall receive. I didn't see you there because of the TV through the chair. Or maybe I'll and later.
Okay. Through the chair to Councillor Logan. So the first question is about the consultant master plan. This is definitely a need that's necessary for the fire department. Past council, we've had several outstanding reports. We did spend quite a bit of time and effort on a 10-minute response time report in the past. It was requested that that be improved upon and further looked into greater detail. And then at the same time, there was a request for a long-term staffing plan. And through that process, we've also implemented the paid-on-call system. So a consultant would end up reviewing the impacts of that, as well as changes in the fire underwriter survey rating. So all of these reports really show the need for an actual master plan review, because there's many moving parts that impact one another. So if we have a change in staffing, it means that potentially we could achieve a 10-minute response time. And if we achieve a 10-minute response time, it impacts our fire underwriter survey rating. And the way that we can get to proper staffing in the future is through continued investment in a paid-on-call implementation. So a lot of this stuff we have in-house expertise to provide those types of reports, but it's an immense amount of work that we just don't have the time for. And I've had experience with consultants in the past that are very supportive, that have the in-depth knowledge and the ability to provide a comprehensive report to council. Sandwich just went through one. It's a much more larger, fulsome type of fire service, but the type of report, there's an example of what can be a deliverable that can help guide council.
Thank you. That's Sandwich. And my other question was, I think, related to the gear and protective gear bullets on here. In the budget, there's wording for critical equipment replacement. Can you define critical? I'm just wondering why the word critical is in there.
Through Chair, Councillor Logan, the critical equipment budget was really put in place in 2016 through the interim Chief Russ Cameron, and it was really the need to show that there's important items that need to be procured. And if I was to break down the critical equipment that you see actually in the budget, that's at about 81,000. That's for replacing worn out fire hose. We also have the need for the expiring of automatic external defibrillators, replacing worn out jaws of life equipment, and 2 more pumps that support our structural protection unit trailer to be compliant with the Office of the Fire Commissioner. And also we have a new thermal imaging camera, and that's being worn out on one of our apparatus.
Great, thank you very much.
Councillor St. Pierre?
I'm curious, sorry, through your worship, I'm curious about the master plan in terms of the content, mostly because the new highway expansion, the work that's going to be happening has brought, the need to bring in water or have some way to address more quickly any fires that might start in that area, or potentially address them more effectively, but I haven't had a chance to ask you, are they already being addressed, or how are they already being addressed? Would this master plan also include that sort of information, or is that outside the purview?
The chair to Councillor St. Pierre, I'd expect that a consultant would look at all the facets when it comes to the fire underwriter survey rating and grading. They would provide a summary of the benefits of what we had achieved with being able to move water in the North Souk area through our procurement of a tender and testing through the Superior Tanker Shuttle Service accreditation. They'd end up looking at what it would mean if we had hydrants out that area as far as benefits to high-risk properties and commercial properties such as the 17 Mile. And also they'd be definitely looking at are we achieving the proper type of personnel to keep Station 2 alive? And if we had some impact with Station 2 with respect to not having enough personnel there, what the fire underwriter survey would require us to do, and the impacts to the dwelling protection grade on the residential lines of insurance. So really to summarize it, if there was water to go out in the new improvement area, it would take less pressure off our need to be shuttling water and testing for Superior Tanker Shuttle service out in that area. And that would be kind of a fulsome, comprehensive summary. That's just part of what a consultant would end up doing.
Thank you.
Carrying on, so just the last item I just wanted to highlight was, again, discussed at the November 4th meeting, was the request for fire to provide an analysis of the paid-on-call system. So I just want to highlight that this will be reviewed by the fire chief in early 2020, and a report brought back to council if, on the results of that. And then as well discussed was just the assurance that a consultant for equipment maintenance is included in the budget. So as I've highlighted, there's $1,000 included for the volunteer mechanic just to compensate that volunteer.
I have a question. So under community safety, that includes the fire department and some of the RCMP.
Yes.
So in 2020, we'll have a census count.
2022.
Thank you, 2022. And so in this section, are you looking forward at the financial implications of if we are over 15,000 in population, and then our contributions will have to change, plus the staffing will have to increase?
Yes, so there's, in the community safety budget, you'll notice in 2022, it is increasing to account for the potential increased district contribution for the, because we're over the 15,000 population. So that, you see the budget going up in 2022 for that. And as well, there is a reserve fund that has been established for anticipating reserve for future policing costs. So $85,000 a year is going into that fund as well to account for that. Once we get a chance to do a bit more work on analysis on the contract and any potential unionization of our CMP, then we can provide a bit more information on potential impacts to future years' budgets. But there is definitely something considered in the budget for police costs increasing in 2022 just based on population.
Great, thank you. Councillor Bateman?
We sign multi-year contracts with the RCMP, is that
Correct,
right?
yes.
So this figure we're seeing here it's a 5-year contract?
Yeah, it's based on the current contract that we have with them. So, but then it's kind of getting complicated if they're talking about unionization and stuff. So
Right.
impacts to be determined, if any, applicable. So we'll kind of definitely can provide some more information to that council at a later date once we have a bit more information on that.
Thank you. And RCAO?
Thank you. The current municipal police unit agreement is a 20-year agreement. It was signed in 2012. It expires in 2032.
Thank you.
Okay, so that.
Sorry, Ms. Gray.
Yep,
Go
that's
ahead,
good.
Councillor
I'd
Bateman.
love to hear the title of that agreement again. What was it?
It is called the Municipal Police Unit Agreement, I believe, or maybe it's Yeah, MPUA.
Right. And it's 20 years, but not at a fixed annual rate, is it? No.
It is an agreement that has a very complicated formula for both members, accommodation, police dog training. It's very comprehensive.
Right. Do you negotiate it annually, a new?
No, there's a process for, so right now we have a strength of 13 on the municipal side in our integrated detachment here. And subsequent to the new staff sergeant being in front of council just recently, we have had discussions subsequent to that meeting where we're going to look at the current strength, the process for strength to be either increased or decreased, just so we both understand what that process looks like. There was some discussion around the need for significant new members. I'm not sure where that comes from. The formula for unit strength is fairly straightforward: population and call volume.
Is that all your questions, Councillor Beebe?
Yeah, great answers.
Okay, so that's kind of it for department requests. And so now some more fun stuff about capital projects. So basically, the next few slides are just going to kind of detail, we're just focusing on 2020 capital projects right now. Again, there is projects included, capital projects in 2021 to 2024. They're kind of either just items that are kind of there year over year, like equipment replacement, computer equipment replacement, upgrades that kind of need to happen every year, placeholder budgets, and a few other projects that have been identified to happen in the out years. But definitely 2020 will be a lot of conversations happening, and anticipate changes to the 2021 to 2024 capital projects once we have a better understanding or prioritization of council of which projects that we would like to accomplish and by when. So right now, these are just kind of focused on the 2020 capital projects in here. So there's a bunch of them. The first item in there is $10,000 for the Arts Advisory Panel. This is a standing item that's in the budget every year for capital, and it's funded through the SPA Reserve Fund, and it funds projects recommended by the SPA Committee for things like the Urban Art Trail and Transit Stop Photos have been funded with this in the past. So obviously recommending kind of keeping that light item there going forward. A new ask this year from Legislative Services is $58,900 for a vault. This is being recommended to be funded through the Capital Asset Replacement Reserve. And this is for our records. It's kind of part of our whole records management project and improvement. Currently, we don't have a location for our records that is fire and waterproof. So if we did have a significant flood or incident, the safe room we have right now could potentially damage our permanent records. So this is suggesting kind of making that current safe room, which is just off our file room, into a more robust, safe area to store our permanent critical records.
Councillor Logans?
Let's say in 10 or 20 years, maybe you don't know the answer to this question, but I'll try through the chair. If we do have to move or replace this building, is that something that we could move as well, or would we have to replace that?
I'm not 100% sure, but I mean, we can definitely, once we find some more information, we just got, Legislative Service just got some initial costing or estimates on it. But it's something we can definitely get some more information about and just confirm the idea behind that, because I think the idea being that we're going to kind of, I believe it should be movable.
I think
it'll be
perhaps
difficult,
our corporate
but
officer
maybe
could
Ms.
speak to
Machada
it.
can probably speak to it better. She's done the research, so.
Thank you, through the chair to Councillor Logans. I believe we will confirm, but it should be, it is being poured on a foundation, but it is essentially a room that's being installed, so it should be able to be moved relatively easily.
So yeah, again, this kind of ties into the strategic plan goals to do better records management planning, and it's just it's an expensive option, but as I mentioned, there's currently a sprinkler head in our safe room right now, so if something happened, things could maybe last for a while, but there's a high risk that our permanent records could be damaged. So that's the request.
Councillor St. Pierre?
Through the chair, I'm just curious because I assumed that most of the records would be digitally stored as well, or there'd be a redundancy system. Are we actually keeping mostly paper records still?
Well, there's a requirement to keep some, like, not all the legislation hasn't changed enough that sometimes you still need paper copies of things. Like digital, things are getting more digital, and digital copies are approved and accepted, but there is certain records that we just still need to maintain paper copies of. So as time goes on, I'm sure if that will kind of increase, but Legislative Services is kind of responsible for all of our records. So Ms. Machado can probably weigh in more on long-term with the digital side of it.
Yeah, so thank you, through the chair. We are working on a new bylaw and a records retention system that will shift us to a more electronic system, but we will also have paper records that have archival value moving forward, so there is that piece of it as well.
Okay. And so the next item is $25,300 for computer equipment. This is just a standard line item every year, so it will just pay for annual hardware renewals and replacements, as well as provide the equipment for new hires. And this is funded through the Capital Asset Replacement Reserve. This is, like, as I mentioned, kind of a standing item that we use to upgrade and improve computer equipment as if when required. The next item on here is the $25,000 is being put aside for the website refresh. So this is to meet the strategic plan goal, and we don't know what this might look like yet, but we just wanted to have budget set aside in here to do that, anticipating that communications coordinator will kind of provide some input and advice on what any new potential website refresh would look like. So we're just kind of wanted to have a bucket of money available to do that because it's quite costly to upgrade websites, and if we did a mobile version, et cetera, because our mobile version isn't the best right now. So so it's just looking into all that, so just having some money available, and this is being recommended to be funded through the Capital Asset Replacement Reserve. The next a capital project is $23,000 for software. Again, this is a standing annual line item that kind of carries over year, and is used as if when required. And so this would be for things like, for Tempest, we're looking at accepting credit card payments, so this would help fund the new module we would need to buy for Tempest to accept credit card payments for e-commerce. As well, like projects like My City, which would eventually could allow people to file building permit applications online or have access to information about their property online. At some point, even maybe pay property taxes through it. Like it's many layers to that My City system. So this is items like that are software-related costs. So it's just kind of having that bucket of money available to fund those as they become a priority for the district to implement. But definitely for 2020, like e-commerce is one for sure that I'm going to be spearheading and looking into getting that going. So that would enable people to pay things with credit card. Again, helping reduce people coming into the district to pay either with debit or cash or checks. And so it would allow realtors, for example, to pay their $15 title search fee just through credit card online potentially. And so this is being recommended to be funded through the Capital Asset Replacement Reserve. Next one is e-bike, as we've already talked about, $3,200. This is for the bylaw, and it's being recommended to be funded by the carbon tax rebate reserve. The next one is $75,000 for building repairs. This again is kind of a standard item that carries over year, and it's basically a bucket for any larger non-operating building repairs that need to happen to the building. And this is being recommended to be funded through the Capital Asset Replacement Reserve. So this one, we don't have anything specific yet. I mean, there's lots of things being talked about, but we're really waiting for that building condition assessment to be received, so then we can reprioritize what projects we would like to try and tackle.
Could we not use that 75 if you have no plans for it, for that assessment?
The assessment's already been funded in 2019 through CAO contingency, I believe. Is that where yeah, I believe it's coming through CAO contingency.
And what's the rough timeline for the completion?
It's currently
Any idea?
underway, and I believe we should have a final report in early January of 2020. It's already been conducted. They've been on site a couple times, I believe, and so early, like into January, we should have a report, at least an initial cut of the report provided to us, so then we can start kind of using that to make some plans and of what priorities would be for this building. You know, just as an example alone, like at some point, we're gonna have to replace the roof, and my understanding is that's a over $200,000 project right there, so. So 75,000 might not be enough, but at least it's something in there, and then we can kind of determine, reprioritize other projects if other projects become more of a priority based on that condition assessment. And this is, again, is being funded, recommended to be funded through the capital asset replacement reserve. And the final one for this slide is 25,000 for furniture replacement. So this is, again, a kind of carry forward every year. It's a bucket of money available for buying new desks. As we have new staff coming on, they need to get, you know, a new desk set up, and on average, they're between $3,000 and $5,000 for a desk and for somebody, and then you got to get a chair and other equipment for them. So it's just a matter of kind of having funds available to replace desks and other furniture as it's getting damaged, and then just outfitting the new hires with a desk and a chair. And
Sorry, did you say it was $3,000 for a desk?
for on average, we've gotten a few of them this year and gotten multiple quotes, and it seems to be about $3,000 to $5,000. It depends on because like we're trying to do like in development services, well, I don't know what operations department, they kind of have a modified kind of pod version where these desks kind of connect together. So it's just for space. We're kind of limited by the space we have with the options we can do for desks. So
Because in my mind right now, I'm like, can we just go onto Virage?
pardon?
Go onto Virage, Craigslist,
Oh,
use
yeah,
Victoria?
right. Yeah. So I mean, that's definitely options too, but it's just
like
a matter.
$5,000 for a desk, but maybe I'll just go down and look at it.
Yeah, so if you kind of can see it, we're tied to, we kind of need to be consistent and uniform so that, you know, people can kind of sit at any desk for one, and then if it's like more of a pod system, there's just a different cost associated, and we're limited by the space layout that we have, what can fit in there, so it makes it a little more complicated, and we're trying to be at least a little more consistent with the desk. So it's just an example of like, that's one thing, and then obviously chairs wear and tear, and an employee comes, they obviously need a new chair.
Wasn't there recently like an assessment and a refresh done of all the office chairs?
We're doing that in stages. So yeah, we did one in 2018. We've done another round in 2019. So it's anticipated to do a final round, and then as well for new hires in 2020. So then that should kind of satisfy any chairs for hopefully, knock on wood, a few years. So yeah, this is kind of phase 2 happened in 2019, and then there'll kind of be the final phase. And that's, in order to get a new chair, staff undergo ergonomic assessments just to kind of confirm like what their desk setup and structure needs to look like, if they need a standing desk or bigger chairs or et cetera. So then that kind of will provide some recommendations on how to outfit the staff member and keep them
Is that
healthy
for
and safe
every
at
single
work.
staff member or just someone who has physical limitations?
It's offered to every staff member. If they feel that they have their desk setup is causing them pain or discomfort, then we offer them the option to once a year have an ergonomic assessor come in, and they provide ergonomic assessments for X number of staff, and then we'll report back with recommendations on potential improvements to make staff more comfortable, because it's the catch-22 of if you don't do that, then they're off sick more, and it's the dance between the two.
From a chair? Sorry.
Yeah.
This is mine.
Yes.
Different situation, individual, one-off, not every single staff member. How much does an ergonomic assessment cost?
I can confirm that, but it's usually, I think, I'd have to get back to you for sure, but if I'm remembering correctly, because it's managed through the property maintenance, the office administration budget, it's about $3,000 to bring the person in, and then they just assess like at least, we have to have a minimum number of people, otherwise we don't bother, like, unless there's a medical need, and then we would do a one-off, but I believe we try to do like 10 people at a time. So it's basically $300 per person to do an assessment, and then we get a report back on what, if any, kind of accommodations or requests will help the employee be more functional and more comfortable and at their desks.
And you might not have this information now, but maybe when we come back to this in the new year, if you could tell me how many ergonomic assessments have been done in
Sure.
the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Councillor Logans?
I hope that every staff has had an ergonomic assessment, and if not, they do get to have one soon.
Yes, and we're definitely have a new round coming in. We always do it at the beginning of every year. So I know I myself have had them, and I think we've captured almost most of the staff. So now it's just going to be some new staff, and then a couple people that were away during last year's round of it. But definitely I can give you some more stats on the ergo assessments and
Thank you.
costing, et cetera, associated.
Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I'm wondering about house calls for we counselors, right? So if you're bringing in the consultant, they might want to, I know my desk chair, for example, I just bought a new one at Staples. I think it was really comfy, $250, but I'm not sure how ergonomically effective it is. Yeah, so just that point, that just please, I'm not sure if we have the right to request ergonomic assessments of our, but maybe one day we will.
I think this is going to be a hot topic later because I feel the complete opposite.
But I think
we
it's
should
good that we're
scrap
doing
it.
this as part of stewarding a healthy, respectful organization.
Exactly,
So-
like that's the,
Absolutely.
and I appreciate where you're coming from. But there's a lot of literature and research saying if you don't have your employees outfitted correctly and working healthily at their desk, then it results in more sick time, more time off, and then that's reduced production, reduce efficiency in the office, less work being done because they got to get up and stretch and walk and do whatever. So there is, it may seem like it costs a lot, but there is other benefits in the long term that kind of help pay for it by more staff productivity and stuff. There's a lot of research and stuff, so we can kind of come back to you with some more information on that.
Could you also tell me how much we spent on office furniture
Sure.
in that same amount of time? Just because I have to go to a grocery store and explain to someone why we spent $5,000 on a desk. So
Yeah,
happy
and
to
that's on
do it.
every desk, like, so.
Fair enough.
That's a high.
I just want to have like a clear conscience so I can explain exactly what is going on. I might.
So yeah, I can definitely get you some more costing on that for sure.
Thank you.
Provide a bit more information on that. Okay, so the next is capital project in here. This is just a continuation of funding the Engine 3 that is currently under construction right now. So this is just part 2 of it is 2019, it was budgeted for the chassis, and then 2020 has the rest of the budget in there for putting it on the truck and then having it delivered to the district in 2020. So that was already been budgeted for in 2019, so it's there. Again, and that is being funded through a 5-year equipment loan. The next fire item is $80,000 for critical equipment replacement, which Mr. Mount kind of provided you a bit more information on critical equipment. And so this is being funded through the fire equipment replacement reserve. So that's just a standard line item, and it's used as if when required to replace the critical equipment the fire department needs. The next is a request of $65,000 for the replacement of car 1. The idea being the old one will be provided to bylaw, and it's being recommended that this is funded through the capital asset replacement reserve. The truck they're looking to replace is a 2009 GMC pickup truck. And it was supposed to be replaced, I guess, a couple years ago, but it's been deferred. And now they're just bringing it back and requesting the funds to replace the truck and reallocate the current one as a second bylaw vehicle available. And originally it was going to be a more robust model, but they've scaled it back, and now they're looking for the lower cost vehicle, which is reflected in the costs here.
Councillor St. Pierre?
I've been noticing fairly high costs in terms of fuel, maintenance, and so on and so forth. And given our, actually, everyone's interest in actually reducing our carbon footprint, just curious about the electrification of our fleet, and whether or not this is an opening into this, and whether or not the type of vehicle that might be needed is available in an electric version that might save us on the fuel costs, and what that return on investment might be. Because if we can start moving in that direction, then especially our staff that do a lot of traveling, like building inspectors, bylaw officers, and so on and so forth, we could be looking at a reduction in our costs over time. I know that even at a family level, purchasing an electrical vehicle could drop it, but I would imagine that if that's your bread and butter, moving around every day all the time, it would be an even better investment, potentially. So I'd love to know if we can look at that and get...
For sure. And I don't think, as far as, I don't believe that the technology is advanced
Perhaps
enough
Chief Matt would like to speak to this.
for the type of truck that the fire requires. But as far as for any other fleet replacement, that's definitely something that would be considered, is as the electrical vehicle technology has changed and advanced, I think we'll definitely have some more options available when it's time to replace any of our other fleet vehicles, like the RAV4 that we bought last year as a hybrid. And then, but definitely electric vehicles is the way to go. Obviously, later on, you'll see a couple bullets down here is talking about the EV chargers project. So as the infrastructure is available, because that would be part of the problem, is you can't have an EV vehicle here if we don't have a charger. So I think once technology kind of advances a little better, we can have, that will be definitely considered for any fleet replacements. But as far as for the fire truck, I don't think anything exists right now that would be sufficient. Or like, the truck, like,
Chief Matt?
Through the chair to Council St. Pierre, existing car one, I believe was a 2008 unit with the label 2009, so it was built in 2008. It was an Olympic legacy device, so it's a hybrid unit right now. It's got active fuel management in it and some other technology. It has a terrible transmission, so it really failed us as far as being able to tow, even with a V8 motor in it. But we have been looking at with the replacement. We're going down a class into like an SUV with a smaller motor, whether it's 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder. Captain McRae ended up looking at the specifications already. The default specification for some SUVs are hybrids, but right now they're about $6,000 more. So for us to go into a hybrid unit for replacing car one, it would probably be about a $72,000 budget we'd want in there. 2 years ago, when that unit was up for replacement, we're looking at a full-size 1-ton pickup truck. We don't really require that now because we have fleets quite robust with towing capabilities. So we've downgraded it down to this type of budget at $65,000 at an SUV type of unit. That would be better for a city running in fire inspections, et cetera.
And while I have you here, Chief, how often do you have a quad or a Polaris type vehicle? How often do you use that?
To the chair, that unit has been utilized probably since we've had it for about 4 emergency calls. The last one I recall was up on the Suk River Road area to support RCMP, and then we've had it on a few standby calls as well there. So it's served its purpose. It hasn't done the long run rescue that we anticipated for, but it's also configured for a little bit of wildfire suppression. So it's designed to serve our needs beyond just rescue.
And just a follow-up to that, do you recall how much that vehicle costs?
Yes, going off the top of my mind, it was a used vehicle that came from Duncan, and I believe it was, we saved about $6,000 off the new price tag. I think it was about $14,000.
And when did we purchase this?
That was 2 years ago, 2017.
Councillor St. Pierre?
Just curious about the hybrid in terms of car one. I'm assuming that this vehicle wouldn't be used, it's an emergency vehicle. It doesn't get used on a daily basis, the same way that a building inspector would be traveling regularly. So I'm assuming the return on investment on moving to a hybrid, the $7,000 increase wouldn't pay for itself in terms of fuel savings or the like?
There's potential there for that savings. In emergency service, we typically look at power and capability as a priority. Though this unit here going down to a smaller type of SUV, we would definitely consider the hybrid unit. the base specification that we're looking at, kind of like the police interceptor unit, that's a fleet designed unit that's a little more robust with reinforced undercarriage. It's coming in less price than the actual default model of an SUV that has a hybrid motor in it. So it would be a decision to council if we really wanted to put that kind of green kind of logo on the side of it. We would need to increase that budget to 72,000 to cover it.
Mike?
Looking at ways to reduce our footprint is in our strategic plan, pretty high priority. So it would be great to have that option in that report. Thank you.
The Chair, to Councillor Logans will definitely propose the quotation when we go out for public tender on this.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. So this is more of the operations / engineering department capital projects. So this is a standing item for the $700,000 being allocated for the 5-year roads program. So 2020 will be year 3 of the program. And this is funded, recommended being funded $160,000 from casino and $540,000 from the gas tax funds that we receive. Next is a carryover from 2019. This is for the $212,000 for the EV chargers. So this was originally just supposed to be a couple, and then it's expanded to more because we had the opportunity to apply for a grant. So we're waiting for confirmation from the province on if we were successful in our grant application. So presumably if we are, then of this project, $75,000 is recommended to be funded through gas tax, and $137,000 of it will be funded with the grant. So we're cautiously optimistic that we will be successful in our grant application, which will be an exciting project to undertake in 2020. This was on the books for 2019, but because we weren't allowed to undertake any work if we were going to apply for the grant, we put the project on pause, reallocated the money to other projects throughout the year, and then are bringing it forward to 2020.
Thank you. Councillor Bateman, you had a question?
Yeah, back to the 5-year road improvement program. I know that has a very specific set of roads that have been mapped out for each of the 5 years. And I was wondering whether that program it potentially could be delayed and that $700,000 redirected to other priority needs in the community. Is that, if indeed it evolves, because I guess the contracts, you don't go out to tender on this until the spring, or?
Well, yes, possibly Mr. Derrick can speak to it a little further, but I believe this was committed to improving certain roads, and these roads were identified, so we're just strategically trying to go through each year and upgrade the roads. I believe there's been some reprioritization of which roads that were included in this, of the timing of when we're going to do it, but I'll defer to Mr. Derrick, who could provide a bit more information.
Through your worship, just to shed a bit more light, as a renewal project, obviously you could put it off essentially as long as you wanted to. However, one of the main reasons for approving the project in the first place was that the longer you waited to do a lot of the work, kind of the higher the cost of the work is going to go up, just because the existing conditions are going to degrade. So often it requires like a higher grade of treatment, more base repair options and stuff like that. So it's one of those things where ultimately it's a balance of what you think is more important.
Yeah, I was just thinking in terms, when the transportation master plan comes through and identifies that perhaps Charters Road needs some quick work, would this not be a place to say, okay, we'll put pause on this for a year and throw this money into something that needs immediate attention?
And I think that could be an option that's
Evolve over the years.
correct, definitely getting the transportation master plan, and we'll provide a bit more information on the condition of our roads and prioritization of potential increases, and then that information can be presented to council, and if we want to reprioritize which roads are going to be fixed and when, absolutely we can undertake that conversation.
Councillor St. Pierre?
Just following up on Councillor Bateman's question. Would this be an automatic process? I mean, once the transportation master plan comes in, would the road work not come into alignment with it automatically? Or is that not the case? I'm just curious.
Through your worship, the Transportation Master Plan, any projects originating under that will be capital in nature, so it'll be looking more at improvement projects. As for renewals, like the road improvement program itself is essentially looking at our existing road network and bringing it up to an acceptable standard. So it's completely separate than anything that will be done in the Transportation Master Plan.
Must stay, 'cause these next few projects are engineering/operations related. So the next one is 200,000 for Church Road widening design. And this is being recommended to be funded 122,000 with roads DCC money. We've got a healthy balance in our roads DCC and didn't have a lot of projects identified. So Mr. Derrick has identified a couple of projects that we can actually try and move forward with getting some design work done this year, and recommending using roads DCC to fund some of the projects. And the additional 78,000 is being recommended to be funded with gas tax. The next one is 256,000 for Throop connector design. Again, all these projects need some design work done first before you can just start repairing things. So it's just to get that design work underway. And this is being recommended for 156,000 to be funded with the roads DCC and $100,000 from gas tax. And the next is $50,000 for Otter Point Road sidewalk design. And this is being recommended to be funded through gas tax. This is a different project than the Ministry of Transportation sidewalk project. This is, sorry, Mr. Derrick, what is the, from where to where?
The extent of the project would be from Otter Point Road at Highway 14, that intersection, to Otter Point Road at Wadham's Way.
Okay, and then a few more from engineering and operations. So this is a standard item. It used to be two separate line items for transit stops and street lighting. We've just combined them to one budget and just reduced it slightly. So this is $20,000 annual budget to be funded through property taxes. And this is for any improvements to be done to transit stops or street lighting that would be considered capital in nature depending on their value. So this is just kind of a standard item that carries forward every year and it's used as if when required. Okay. And the last one for engineering operations is $100,000 is just carrying forward from 2019 for the Ministry of Transportation Otter Point sidewalks joint project. And this is being recommended to be funded with operating surplus. This is a carryover from 2019. And my understanding is transportation was here and there were some conversations taking place. So might need to confirm prioritization with council if this is something that we will undertake in 2019 or 2020 or potentially wait for 2021. I think just some more information. But it's been included in here because it was carried over from 2019. So this is the budget that was allocated in 2019 that has just been carried forward to 2020.
Councillor St. Pierre?
Your worship, to Mr. Derrick. I'm just assuming based on, and this is going back a page, that the Church Road widening design, the other design work, it looks like you might have had a sneak peek at the Mass Transport Master Plan just because it seems to be connecting things really to Lot A. Is that the case, or?
Through your worship, the Church Road widening project is actually a DCC project from the 2009 Transportation Master Plan. We expect it to be continued in the modern master plan, but yeah, it's actually, we're looking at the old master plan to kind of access those DCC funds with projects that we think will be very pertinent to the new master plan as well. So we're kind of trying to get everything head started.
Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, the 100,000 for the Moti Otter Point sidewalk. Now that's our contribution to over $1 million project. Is that correct?
Through your worship, I believe the agreement with the Ministry of Transportation was that we budgeted $100,000 last year for the project and then $100,000 this year. So our contribution was to be $200,000 and there's $900,000.
And that would extend from Otter Point to, was that Ed McGregor Park? Was that the?
Through your worship, I'm not sure the exact specifics because they might be changing pending what was discussed in camera. So that's something where the MOT is going to be coming back to staff with their kind of their new iteration of the design to show exactly what can be achieved with the current funding.
So yeah, again, that number's in there just as a placeholder to not let the project be forgotten about, but pending further information from transportation will dictate if we need to make any changes to this number. And the final one is $150,000 for Murray Road drainage improvements. And this is being recommended to be funded $50,000 from the casino fund and $100,000 from the capital improvement financing fund. And then switching over now to some parks projects. So the first few ones here are carryovers from 2019 that didn't actually get completed. So we're just requesting to carry them forward to 2020 and undertake to actually get these completed in 2020. So the first one is $150,000 for the Bluff staircase. And this is being recommended to be funded $100,000 from casino, $15,000 from capital works, and $35,000 from gas tax.
I have a question for Ms. Hooper. Earlier this year, we attended the grand opening of the most recent staircase, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful, and the kids love it, and they use it a lot, which is fantastic. But when you get down to the bottom, it's more of a viewing platform, and to get the beach access, it's not easy. It's way easier to get down there now, of course, and it's way safer, but just those last steps to the water, is there any plan to take a look at that?
Yes, Your Worship. We had thought that we could, because it's an intertidal zone, it makes it very difficult, if not impossible, and impractical to put wood in that area. So we have been considering what we could do from a aluminum ramp or something that could more float better on the foreshore. So we will look with engineering to see how best to accommodate that. But that's something that could be taken care of in our operational budgets.
Okay, great, thank you. The next one, carryover again, is $35,000 for Caltassin access to water. And this is being recommended to be funded from $22,500 from casino, $3,800 from capital works, and $8,800 from gas tax. The next project that's currently underway, I believe, is just a carryover from 2019. And this is the continuation of the Demamuel Creek Connector project. And it's being recommended to fund $12,500 from casino, $44,000 from gas tax, and a grant of $146,000. And there's more on Demamuel Creek to come because Laura's really excited about Demamuel Creek. So, and the other carryover is $50,000 for the memorial wall at Whiff and Spit. Presentation was made to council in later mid-2019. And some design changes were being considered. So this is just carrying the project over to 2020 to finalize the design and to get that installed at Whiff and Spit. And this is being funded with a spa reserve.
Yeah, I don't know about installation, because that seems premature to me, because we had very... What's that? Yeah, this comment is more just for public's understanding, just so that they aren't misunderstanding that it's not being installed this year, per se. Like, there's that potential. I have looked at other memorial options, like Sarah Beckett Memorial. You could purchase a brick. I think it was $250 for the brick, for the inscription and the installation, and then that money went to fundraising for a park. Have you looked or had a discussion at all with the committee about...
Yes, Your Worship. Back in 2018, it was the SPA committee at the time led by Councillor Parkinson who devised this memorial wall structure on Whiff and Spit. So they had looked at a bunch of different options at that time. And this budget item was just moving forward based on that recommendation. And I believe you are correct that there is a bunch of designs that are coming back for council to consideration, and at that time council will decide whether to award that or not based on those designs, or give staff the direction to go back to the drawing board.
Right, thank you. And since I have you here as well. We discussed at a previous council meeting signage for crabbing. And can you share a little bit?
So we did receive a crabbing signage from DFO, and then we're informed that those weren't the necessarily appropriate signs to be put in. So we have contacted DFO, and we're still trying to struggle that one out.
Great, maybe I can help you.
Maybe you could.
And then the printing of the signs or the creation of the signs and then the installation, Parks is taking care of that, not DFO?
That's an operational budget item that we would just take care of. It's just simpler that way.
Great, thank you.
Okay, moving forward, the last carryover one is just a carry on, moving the budget forward for the finalization of the Parks and Trails Master Plan. And this is just being recommended to be funded with the casino funds. So, as you know, the report should be coming in 2020, and that will kind of give council some guidance and information on how to potentially prioritize any future improvements to our parks and trails in the District of Souk. Okay, just a few more, and then that's it for capital. Did you have a question? Okay. Okay, so $100,000 for parks asset repairs. This is kind of a repurposing and re-messaging of a light item that we kind of had before for parks asset repairs. So we just really want to dedicate some funds specifically for parks asset repairs. And this would be things like like any fencing that we need to replace, like at McGregor Park, we just had to do that fencing. Any kind of capital repairs, just have this fund available, like a general fund that we can use to do any of these other kind of repairs or improvements to our current parks. And so this is being recommended to be funded $30,000 from Capital Works, $40,000 from gas tax, and $30,000 from the Capital Asset Replacement Reserve. The next one, I'll let Ms. Hooper kind of talk to a little bit, but this is the Demamule Creek Bridge crossing, and we're recommending $96,000 be funded through property taxes, $37,000 from casino, $325,000 from gas tax, and a grant of $966,000. Obviously, this project can't go ahead without the grant, so I'll let Ms. Hooper maybe provide a bit more information on the actual project.
So, through your worship, this is phase 2 of the Demamule Creek pedestrian crossing, which actually gets us across the creek. And the number you see in front of you is an extremely high-level number. We don't even have the Class D cost estimates ready yet, but the call for grants will be coming out in the coming weeks. So we're going to have that Class D cost estimate really soon, but we needed to get this number in the budget. It's likely going to be less, but I can't promise you that. And this is just a placeholder at this stage. So I'm cautioning everybody not to freak out. Don't freak out. But you want to make sure that you have enough in there because you wouldn't want to have to reallocate things later. So this was a proactive, high-level response.
Okay.
Councillor Bateman.
For you, Your Worship, the Canada Infrastructure Grant, is that correct? Would that?
This is the Active Transportation BC or Bike BC. It's been rebranded to Active Transportation or Active BC.
Okay, 2 more. So the other one, big ticket item, I missed an M, is $1.2 million for the multi-sport court box. So this is just carrying over from 2019. The district currently has a grant application in with Canada Infrastructure for this completion of this project. And so this is being recommended to be funded $330,000 from the Plainfield Reserve Fund, which can only be used for this project, basically. If it's Sun River contribution at their development there, so there's a parcel of land that has been allocated that this project can go on, as well as we're anticipating the grant could be $890,000 contribution towards this project. The current balance in the Plainfield Reserve Fund is $400,000, just over $400,000. So there is, for the estimated cost of $1.2 million, again, that was an estimate cost increase. So we do have another $78,000 approximately left in the reserve fund to fund any overages, because the way the grant works, if we're over cost, it's the district's responsibility to fund it, that we don't get extra grant money from this grant to pay for that. So there is an additional pocket of money available for any other overages or potentially any other additions to the project that could be used.
Councillor St. Pierre?
I don't know if you're, sorry, through your worship, I don't know if you're the right person to ask or if someone else is available, maybe Ms. Hooper. The multi-use box I know is, basically multi-sport facility type of situation, but I'm also aware that Sun River has a dearth of playgrounds for its many, many families. And so I was curious as to whether or not there were any considerations, I don't remember them in the past, in terms of including that in this particular development or in this project.
Through your worship, is intended or expected that the multi-sport box will be co-located with the school district's new schools, and those come with playgrounds. The dearth of playgrounds that are currently exist in Sun River could be improved with some capital money. So say the Sun River Tot Lot, which is only a swing and a climbing structure, it could be improved over time with capital investment, perhaps. But we are hopefully going to get a school district building with a playground shortly that would help the kids in those neighborhoods.
Thank you.
And
Not too generally.
just to add on to that a little bit, there is ideas potentially of, because the multi-sport box won't use all of the land available, so I know council in the past has expressed some interest in having like potentially like a dog park there or a water park or things. Obviously those come with costs, so we're kind of focusing obviously on the multi-sport court box first, and then we can kind of reprioritize or redetermine if anything else is warranted to be put on that site on the available land.
Or some cheap trails.
Or tails. And then the last capital item is, again, just a standard annual line item in the capital budget, and that's $20,000 for Parks Department equipment, repairs, new equipment purchases that need to happen. And this is funded through the Capital Asset Replacement Reserve. So this is used as if when required, especially if new workers are being hired, then they'll be required to have potentially some new equipment that could be funded through this account. So there's nothing specific for this. This is just there for as when items come up, then they can be replaced through this fund. So that's it for capital. Then the last few slides, I just kind of wanted to really tie back to how this budget helps council achieve the goals you set out in the 2019 to 2022 strategic plan. Because there's a lot of verbiage on these slides, but I really wanted to highlight, like, we're doing a lot of stuff internally here, either new additions or just business as usual projects and work happening that will help council be successful in achieving these goals by 2022. Some kind of will be happening all along, they're ongoing. Some would just be one-time goals, but I just kind of wanted to take a few slides and just kind of bring this back to your strategic plan and how this budget is helping you maintain the goals in your strategic plan. So some of the goals being addressed, 1.1.3 was the QB collective agreement. So that has now been ratified and expires in 2021. So the increases that have been agreed to have been factored into the budget in front of you in all the out years. So that satisfies that goal. 1.2.2 was to hire a director of operations. This is currently posted and the salary has been included and has been included in the 2020 budget and prorated to estimated start dates and will be funded going forward. 1.2.3, improve efficiency and staffing in the building department. I just wanted to, again, highlight, this was a big topic of conversation in 2019. And so as a result of that, new processes have been updated. We've received some positive feedback from the developing community so far. There was a new chief building official hired in 2019. The 2020 reorg moves the department under planning and development, which should bring greater efficiencies. There's budget being allocated for increased training for the inspectors, and a second vehicle has been added and will stay with the department. And another improvement for 2020 is looking at the software options for potentially online permit applications. 1.2.6, update business license bylaw. Bylaws now, with the reorg, will be moving over to Legislative Services Department in 2020. So that can provide some better support to the bylaw department and kind of will help provide some, should satisfy that goal of updating the business bylaw, license bylaw. And tying into that again is the 1.2.8, consistent application of the bylaws and policies. Again, bylaw moving to legislative services will provide greater consistency. And along with the overall reorg, I think will better align the departments to work together to help be more consistent in the application of bylaws and policies. 1.2.9 is about improving records management. So 2020 includes increased software costs for things like Collab Space and SharePoint. A records management clerk has been hired in 2019, and the capital purchase for a vault is being requested in 2020. 1.3.1, the
Sorry,
goal.
if I may,
Yeah.
I just want to have a connection here with the group, just in the essence of time, because we're all like fantastic conversation, no wasted words, and very informative. We still have about 5 pages to go through. So does the group want to continue to go through in this mission, like this amount of minutia for each of these points? Or are you comfortable just reading through it and then highlighting or asking a question on the one that you have?
You're comfortable with asking questions?
Okay. Councillor Logans?
Perhaps through you to staff, are we planning to go through this document and then the budget as well, line by line, or are we, maybe not today, but just in general? Because typically, like, we would go through that way as well. One of my concerns is that I don't have, and I believe this came up last year, and I think that Ms. Gray had a good answer, but I don't recall, and I still want the information. So in previous years, we'd had an actuals budget so that we can compare the previous year, because right now it's just difficult.
It's just looking forward right now.
Yeah, it's just looking forward. So like that's one of the things that I would like to go through as well.
Yeah.
Before, say, this goes like out to the public or anything like that for consultation. I don't know.
Okay. Well, yeah, just to cover that off, I mean, that's one of the downsides of doing this earlier is we're not done our year end yet, whereas at this time last year, like in February of last year, we were pretty much done the year end and all the year end adjustments had been done. So that information was more accurate and correct. So, but definitely I can provide the budget to actual information to kind of be considered as far as the presentation goes. Then basically I was just going to walk through some of the strategic plan goals, and then that was kind of open it up to any questions or comments of any specific line items that you might want to discuss, because that's why I've tried to highlight it in the department requests of any changes to the line items. So if there's any other line items you want to talk about, that would be it. And then I can definitely provide you guys updated budget to actual, and then if that's posing any questions. But I definitely looked at that and considered that with any budget requests going in there. So that's been kind of factored in.
Okay, so just to confirm, then I'm happy to go through like the last few of these swiftly, hopefully, in the next half hour at most. But just going back to what you were saying about how this process is working in January, we would have, we would have a phase 2, like a second draft of this, and then it would go out to public consultation?
Well, the next steps would be to incorporate any feedback from this over the next few weeks here. And then the public consultation would be the next step in presenting this to the public and getting any feedback or any revised or recommendations from the public. And then those can be factored into an amended plan that would come forward to council after the public input session that would factor in any requests or adjustments from the one in front of you, and that includes your requests and public requests in there.
Okay, I think for my own, and also because we don't have Mayor Tate here, for instance, but, I think we need another round. And whether that fits in before or after, I think before third reading, it would be nice to take another deeper look. I'm not sure how that might fit into the timeline, but I think it would be helpful
if
And
possible.
preferably after we get that information, so you can have more accurate numbers here, because you've, like you said, you've had to bookmark or, just do a rough estimate, so it's hard to make decisions if you don't have it all just yet, so we're doing great because we're ahead of the game, or we're on time for once. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and even if it's like a rough budget to actuals or budget to the third quarter or something, so we have a general idea of where we were at.
Yeah, for sure. I think we can, I believe, I'll defer to the corporate officer, but I believe we can have another budget meeting and talk about further information there and continue this on. I know last year we had a couple of them scheduled, and then we got through everything in the first meeting, so we ended up canceling the other meeting. So I think this one was just booked, and then kind of to assess what do we need to do next. So if you would like to have another meeting, we can definitely do that and just undertake a different analysis or look at different numbers and any feedback you have from today's and incorporate all that.
And perhaps Cecilia could jump in, and then Councillor Bateman, you can.
Yeah, so I need a bit more clarity on what this next meeting would look like. Because today, what we were hoping to get was a first and second reading on the budget. So the budget is followed by the tax rate bylaw, and that's what really sets the taxes. So I'm not sure if you're looking for more information on the tax impact or just the revenue and expenses, because the revenue expenses are in the council agenda for today's meeting. There may be some slight changes to that based on resolutions provided by council today. What would the next meeting before third reading, and what would we want to accomplish there?
Right.
I think if we're looking to wrap this meeting up in the next little bit, I don't know, that was the question posed. I think there's a lot more that I'd like to just, I have some motions that we could put forward, but I would also like to see the 2019 numbers and see where they were at compared to where we're going into 2020. That was the way, that was status quo for many years, and it was nice to have to relate to what the current budget line is. I mean, when I look at this budget now, it's like, yes, okay, there's $10,000 in 2020, but what was it in 2019? So I'd have to go back to the old budget, look that up, see what the old budget says, right? It's just nice to have there. But
So
then in
before,
relation
so the check-in was more that, do we need to be in the minutia for the strategic plan, or can we move on to the next phase of this meeting, which is where the motions and the suggestions and
And
perhaps
that's
the debate
exactly
will
what I
come to.
mean, as well as are we going to go line by line through the budget? If so, I would like another meeting to do that, because it is nice to go line by line through it. It is nice to have another meeting where the mayor and Councillor Beddoes can be present as well and go through the minutia. I am happy with this. I think it's been absolutely excellent, and I don't see any red flags that I'm trying to allude to. I'm just saying in general, I definitely don't want to have, in the past, I think 2 years ago, we had 8 budget meetings, and it was just torturous for everyone. Yeah. I think Councillor Bateman's laughing because he was there in the public. And it was horrendous. But one is probably, on top of the service level review, one is, I would like to have another. As well, this one's occurring during the daytime, so it doesn't allow a lot of the members of public to come and provide input. While there will be public input, it is a nice option to have a daytime meeting, an afternoon meeting, and the public session so that public can come and consult.
So we did do our best to try and wrap that up at a high level. So the change is $1.42 million. That's the difference between 2019 and 2020. And each of the items that Ms. Gray spoke about today added up to that $1.42 million.
Sorry, does that $1.4 million include the outside organization request?
It does.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so that's really what we were looking for, going through the budget line by line. Yeah, that can be painful, and I'm not sure the value of it. Providing you with year-to-date 2019, certainly that's an option. We can do that for the meeting that we hope to go through. If we stay on the schedule we anticipate now, that third reading meeting would have any resolutions from this meeting today, Plus, we would map out any comments that we thought should be included from the public input session and provide that to council before third reading. Any amendments can be done to the bylaw before it goes to third reading.
So perhaps
Okay,
that's the
so
time where.
I'm just saying that personally, I want another meeting. If people don't agree, that's fine.
It can be a motion. Yeah, absolutely. And then just to Ms. Gray, so you've got the 6.58% increase for 2020. So that is including everything, the outside organizations.
Correct, yeah, that includes all the numbers that have been put in front of you today, the massive amount of numbers put in front of you. Those have all been factored in there, so any reduction or change to any of those numbers will either reduce or increase that potential increase. So there's definitely, as it says, this is the first draft presented for conversation, and depending on the results of council's desires, then we can increase, decrease any of these items and present a revised with budget to you at the future meeting. That would include a revised property
Which at
tax
that point, we
increase.
could look at the previous year and get that information beforehand
Yeah,
to
and-
review, and then the public can come to speak, or they can email in their thoughts. Sorry, Councillor St. Pierre, you had a question?
I just, excuse through your worship, I just had something that was confusing me, and I'm sure there's a simple answer. There's a 1.42 million increase from 2019 to 2020, is that correct?
In the overall budget, so so that's not just property taxes. Property taxes is 700,000 of that number. The rest comes from either grants, additional grants we're receiving, or additional borrowings, or like it's the combination of all those 4 buckets of money. It's not just the property tax side. It's the combination of all the inputs into the budget.
All right. Still looking at that, even if it's $700,000, and obviously that helps a lot because I was getting a 20% tax increase, dividing 700,000 by 70, which I understand gives us about 1%. How do we get the 6.58?
So that's like a complicated calculation between the inputs with the reserve funds and how we're funding certain things. So basically, the way the budget works is at the end of the day, for the consolidated page, there's a formula in there that takes in the revenue sources, other sources, fees and charges, transfer from funds, subtracts all the expense items, and then the property tax number is the end result to make the inputs and outputs balance to zero. So there's basically some ins and outs for each one of these lines that result in the net increase to property taxes of 6.58 from what we were looking for.
Okay, so through your worship, if I understand correct, that just means that the 700,000 wasn't taking into account all our revenues and other sources of income or monies.
Yeah, it's a net increase because then other items have increased as well, like fees and revenue have increased. So it kind of nets out, that's the net result of all the inputs and outputs into the budget for the year.
Perfect. I was just getting a really weird number and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, it's kind of a complicated calculation back there, but, and definitely for the future meetings, I'll be able to provide a bit more deep dive and analysis onto it. It's just, this was the first kind of cut of it and wanted to get some feedback before I squirrel away too much on any crazy.
You're really looking for like large red flags that council feels strongly about.
Exactly, like
at
if there's
this
some big
time.
ticket items that you're right away going, I think we need to pause that, then I can take that
Right.
into consideration. Like I said, I will have the BC assessment data by time January rolls around, so it can provide a bit more information and definitely can provide a more deep dive on the 2019 actuals and kind of where we're at. But I definitely considered those in any potential budget changes of how much have we spent this year and
we
what has
totally
been spent
understand
on
that.
that.
It's just for us to, it's nice
For
to
sure.
go through, and then it will raise stuff. You are immersed in the numbers all the time, and we are not as much as you. So it's so nice to have those, because then you can say, oh, well, what's this? What happened here?
Mm-hmm.
I know that's what I'd like to see too. Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I would definitely agree that our constituents would want us to do as close a line by line as possible. But personally, the only page that I'm really interested in doing line by line on is our council budget, and look carefully at how we've allocated funds on that page. I think staff have shown their, I really appreciate the strategic plan breakdown. Thank you. It's exactly what we need to see, and I agree we don't have time today to continue the granular details on it. And I think we definitely need Mayor Tate and Councillor Beddoes in the room with us when we do this. And I think it would be, like I say, I'd like to do some heavy, not heavy, but significant look at our council page, and then perhaps we'll, a quicker run through the rest of the departments. Because I think our constituents would like us to carve off a percentage point, maybe. Wouldn't they?
So for right now, it's like,
At least.
it's any big red flags that you see that were in the budget presentation today. So does anybody have anything that they want to add more, they want to take away? And before we do that, I'm just going to suggest we take a quick 5-minute health break. Super, so what time is it? So it's 3:59, so just everyone be back by 4:05. And on that note, we'll get started again here. So just going to look to our CAO, right now is our time to basically call up any big red flags that we have. And then we will come back in the new year, all of council should be present, and we will get the information from Ms. Gray that's got the previous year and further if we want. And then at that point, we can go through line by line and make any amendments at that time.
So our next meeting is scheduled, well, other than the open house on January 22nd, the next meeting is scheduled for February 10th. So that was on the schedule, the meeting that we would be looking for third reading at.
Right.
We may not get third reading at that meeting. That will give you the opportunity to do what you need to finish up this process. If we get third reading on the 10th, we would be really happy, but we're cognizant that may not happen. So to wrap up today, really what we were looking for were, as Councillor Bateman alluded to, send us away. If you want to cut by 1%, we're quite capable of doing that. If you want to set a maximum increase, we can bring that back for third reading. So those are the types, and really, I'm hearing from my colleagues here that the process is different, but really the process that we're enacting now, or the path we're going down, that service level review, really that is that proxy for the old line by line meetings that we used to do in local government. That's where really we talk not about the line by line, but really the services. How do we want to set the service level and what's the impact of that service level? So what we tried to do today is talk to you about the service level, the resolution that you made, and the impact of that on this budget. So really what I was hoping to get today was just that direction from council is we're good with your projections now, or no, it's too rich. Maybe it's not rich enough. One of the vulnerabilities that you heard today, and I certainly share, is our contribution to reserves and the sustainability of that long term. So we may want to put more money in this budget and start working on that. I'm not sure if 2020 is the right year for that, but it certainly is a discussion I think that's worthy of having. So really that's the direction that we were looking for today, leaving the meeting.
And public still there'll be the open house before the February meeting, and all of just sort of walk us through like how the information is collected from the public.
So I anticipate we'll have some sort of written format that people can leave behind, or verbally they can leave their information with us or their requests with us. We would try and summarize those into various themes, and then we would go through the themes at third reading, and this is what we heard at the public hearing. These are the themes where, service levels may not be right from the public's point of view. They want to see more or less in this or that.
And if someone's unable to attend the public open house, is there an opportunity online for them to submit their ideas?
Yes, through your, definitely, any public at any time can send in information request through info@soup.ca, and if it's specific to the budget, which is out there now publicly, any requests or for information that came through that would be then triaged most likely to me first to determine the answer to that question. And similar to kind of tying on to a little bit of what happened last year was we did the open house. There was like at each kind of like workstation, there was sheets there where public could write down some feedback or comment or questions. And then we also had an internal meeting after where everyone met and talked about, okay, what did people say? Even if it wasn't a written down thing, but we just kind of made sure we included and or addressed any of the public comments and just addressed those at the next meeting when we went back to council with that. So it was just kind of a combination of official in writing, emails coming in, or just verbal conversations that happen with the public out there.
And then at some point, rather than someone just writing an email to info, is there a better way to filter so it's more constructive feedback? Because I can just see like a huge, well, maybe not huge, people start asking questions and then you're tasked with individually responding to each question, whereas it could be like a more targeted like link, like a monkey survey or something like that, where it's directed with black and white sort of answers or insight.
Yeah, well, I mean, that as far as for the budget goes, what will get updated shortly is, not exactly answering your question, but we have the online property tax calculator, where based on the potential budget, and once I know that BC assessment data, then I'll feel way more comfortable about updating that calculator, where someone can put in their average assessment is X, and it'll dictate, or it'll show them approximately how much of their tax dollars go towards fire, go towards finance, go towards operations, like each of the departments. So that'll break the, so that's just one way for them to get some information on it.
Yeah, it's a great
And then there isn't like a form, like, I mean, we currently don't have like a formal just budget
Yeah.
one like section on our website, but we can definitely look at doing more engagement and communication with that for sure for future.
Thank you. Councillor St. Pierre, you had a question?
Yes. Mostly about the public engagement. I know that public engagement, especially in council chambers, welcome. It's good to have you. Isn't always as numerous as we might like. Wondering if we might not do this maybe at Sea Park or somewhere else where even in 20 minutes to half an hour, you probably get the 20 people that you'd get here normally. It just seems like a bit of a waste of staff time and resources to do it here. If we're going to do it at all, maybe we should really get some public happening.
Through your worship, I believe, so last year, my understanding is a couple years ago, we did, had booths at Talktober. Ms. Machado can probably speak to it a little bit more. And then I don't know that a lot of information or feedback was received there. So last year was just based on the situation of everything going on. It was the open house and council chambers was what was chosen. But I'll let Ms. Machado weigh in on prior year, Talktober kind of, or Sea Park kind of hosted events.
Ms. Machado?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, so what I can recall is we have done the financial plan engagement at the community hall, and then last year it was done here, and I'm being told by staff that the attendance at the council chambers last year was much more well attended than the input session that we had at the community hall. As long as well, you know, there is just the strategies of trying to plan that, because all of the equipment and information needs to be taken off-site by staff and things like that, whereas when it's internal here, it's a lot easier to put the event together. But the feedback we've received is much more attendance when it's been in-house here.
And we, last year, you know, we ensured it went, I believe, from like 1 till 7. So there was, you know, afternoon time, and then we were here for after hours as well. So people driving, commuting in, obviously, would then have the opportunity to come in after hours. So people kind of just trickled in all throughout that time frame and visited the different booths and stuff that we had set up. And so we just definitely made sure it wasn't just like an afternoon meeting or presentation.
Is there just going to be the one open house, or will you do multiples?
It was anticipated just to do the one, again, just based on public attendance and feedback. The best use of everyone's time was trying to just do the one session and promote it and get people coming to the one. Again, just kind of the prior year concerns with public not really coming out, so it's a lot of staff time would gets involved in hosting more than one session. And so we found last year kind of doing the one with the hours starting at 1, ending after 5, kind of got us so far the best amount of public input and feedback on that. So right now it's just been proposed to do the one session.
Right, makes sense. Ms. Machado?
Thank you, Chair. So there is one planned open house, which is more of an informational session, as well as receiving feedback. And then there is also the formal public input session at the meeting that we schedule third reading at, which is received before third reading. So if there is any additional input there that council feels is significant enough to warrant any changes in the third reading bylaw, they can always defer third or give third as amended if it's easy enough to incorporate at that meeting.
Okay, great. So I'm satisfied. Is everybody else? Miss Councillor Logan?
I have a few things that I wanted to, I'm happy to make motions and we can discuss them.
Sure.
For removing from the budget. And I'll just list them out and then maybe see if they warrant motions. But the few things that I have here would be to,
So I'm just looking to corporate service. Are you
yeah,
okay?
it's
Okay.
just discussion. Like how I said, we should have another meeting, and that just got shut down without a motion. Like removing the increase for committee support, I think we can all work together to move in a direction that we don't need to increase that support. And as long as it's good with corporate services to work with what we have now, I think we can find a framework that will work within that budget. That additional 10K from the $10,000 from council travel, we did briefly discuss, that can probably be cut right away. And then I'd like to see a reduction in, you guys aren't going to believe I'm going to say this, but I'd like to see a reduction in the grant funding. It did go up from like 75,000 for one, it was going to go up for 1 year because, because I guess we just approved quite a lot that one time, and now seeing it at 90,000, it's a lot. So there were a lot of things that I think could have been reduced in that initial bump, and I'd like to see that brought back down, maybe like by 15, 20,000. Again, you probably not believe I was going to say that out of all the people, but those are the things that I'd like to talk about at least.
Councillor St. Pierre?
Similar things, I think. I'll discuss some of Councillor Logan's recommendations in a moment, but I'm interested in potentially reducing and maybe moving the 25K for the consultants within the planning department either into council contingency or doing something along those lines. I'm interested in making sure that there's actually some money somewhere for climate work, because right now, so far, my understanding is that would be strictly in council contingency. And given our second goal in our strat plan, I understand that there's a lot of elements of the present budget that actually address various aspects of it. If we have any interest in any new initiatives or projects, we have no way to actually resource them in any way. The EMCS theater seats, I fully support their work. I think they're doing a great job on fundraising. I think they will continue doing a job on fundraising, and I think that we could probably reduce that by some amount.
Perhaps the simplest will be that we just go topics here. Not line by line, not by line.
Sorry to jump in. What we've done in the past is instead of line by line, because I agree it's too much, but doing section by section at least and saying, is there a red flag in the section? Yes, this is it. Can we discuss it? And making motions per section. That also allows people like Councillor Bateman and I to leave the room during certain important discussions. So right now, we don't have quorum for that.
Do I continue?
Sorry. Go ahead, Councillor St. Pierre.
And if we want to discuss, for example, the committee support, I think that for the first time we've actually provided specifically the Climate Action Committee with support, and it has helped, I think, the group move forward more quickly on its mandate. I think that once we've reviewed the committee structure, decided what we want them to do, it would be useful to resource them. If there's resources elsewhere, as Councillor Logans has suggested, then I'm fine with it, but I do think that we should be trying to make sure that our committees can do the work they need to do, and that the resources are in place to make that happen. I think that's it. Thank you.
Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, so on the council budget page, as I said during the break, I think I agree with Councillor Logans that our community grants, 90,000, we spent 68,000 this year, and I think we could reduce it back to that amount and take that additional 22,000 and redistribute it in a few places here. I do think we've been talking. Well, we have $2,500 for sponsorships. I'm curious to see.
The actuals?
Well, yeah, what did we do this year? And I suspect we spent more than that. No, we didn't. Okay. So those were coming out of contingency. So I think maybe we need to bump up our contingency to give us a little more leeway as the year unfolds. And I'm also wondering about events. We've got the levy and the parade here. We've been talking about event planners and whether we as a council would be in a position to have a budget to be able to bring forward potential community events and then be able to hire, because I know it's hard on corporate services to be event planners as well. Maybe we could take part of this community grant budget and pop it into that area. And I've forgotten what else you said, Ebony. Councillor Logans.
Grants of travel, you were being talking about.
Right, yeah. So I agree that that first year we needed to be, we traveled as a pack, and over these next 3 years, I think we need to strategically, small groups of us go off and report back.
So some things I'm hearing right now, they're the bigger, higher level stuff that we can knock off right now.
Right.
And then there's more stuff that we can have a full quorum for, even if people have to leave.
In February.
In February.
Yes,
Yeah.
agreed.
So perhaps we'll go
These things can all be
partway by
discussed.
going through the categories, or whatever you want to call them. Any major red flags we can note now, and if there is potentially a red flag, but if the people leave the room that have quorum, that's a topic to be brought forward in February.
Yeah.
Let's just all do it in February, then that makes no sense.
Well, staff will need some direction starting now.
I think the direction I want is moves for second reading.
Right, so here's an example. So outside organization requests, is there anyone here that disagrees with the suggestion? The outside organization request, which has been included in the budget, so which is the,
You can't ask that with Jeff and I in the room.
I'm just asking for a red flag. Perhaps that's not the thing. So let's make it simple.
Simple would be move first and second reading, end the meeting,
That's what's gonna happen.
reconvene.
That council give first and second reading to the bylaw cited as the 5-year financial plan bylaw number 770-2020.
So moved.
All right, moved by Councillor Bateman. Seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. All those in favor? All those not? One in opposition is Councillor Logans. Passes.
And Mayor?
No. Councillor St. Pierre?
Just to clarify, this still allows us to actually look at some things and make some adjustments.
Absolutely. So it's
Yes.
going to go to public open house.
Perfect. Just to
All of their
just to
comments and
clarify.
feedback will come to this meeting in February, and then we will get the previous year to compare line by ourselves, to do our own homework. We will bring that to the table. We should have a full council at that point, so then we can get right into the granular. And, and then any member of the public that can't attend that one open house can send their feedback online.
Thank you for a lovely recap, Your Worship.
Super. Thank you.
And if I could,
Please.
I'm starting to anticipate that perhaps that February 10th meeting will not lead to third reading, and that's fine.
Yeah, of course.
We can use that as the meeting that some council members want to go a little deeper, and that's perfectly fine.
We'll just all brace for a long meeting.
The sort of the lines in the sand, of course, is we've got to have the tax rate bylaw done by May 15th, so we've got.
Right. But we're in
plenty
really
of
good
time.
shape compared to previous years, correct?
Yeah, and I don't think, we don't have any major capital projects that are really critical that we get tenders out early. And that is really the big reason why getting the budget adopted early typically lets us get tenders out, and you get preferential pricing on major projects. So.
Right, yeah. Thank you for sharing. That's a good point. Ms. Machada?
Thank you. I just wanted to jump in, noted that February 10th is a regular council meeting, so if the intent is to have a more fulsome discussion about the budget again, I suggest that we actually reschedule that to a different day, which could perhaps be a cow on the 18th or a special meeting on the 18th, which would be our cow for February.
Okay, perhaps you could send an email out with the suggested dates, and then the mayor and Councillor Beddoes can chime in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, just for the public, for the open house, I've got a couple of really good documents here. One's from the City of Victoria, and their vast communications department had produced their 2020 draft budget summary. But there's a much simpler one from North Cowichan, and they focus very strongly on, you know, what's included in our proposed 4.2%, and just this very simple, what would the proposed 4.2% cost you? And it says $69 a year, and it's very, you know, so I'll share these with you. And a document like this would be really useful.
Councillor St. Pierre?
Motion to adjourn?
There's no new business.
New business.
Thank you. My understanding is that when the agenda was adopted, there was no new business added, so it would really be appropriate to adjourn if there's no further discussion on the budget.
Great. It was moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Logans. All in favor? Unanimous.